Hey, I'm Alex. I'm 19, and lately, life's been pretty rough. If you're into stories about dealing with some intense family issues, stick around, you won't want to miss this. 3 years ago, my mom passed away suddenly in a car accident. My dad and I were heartbroken. My older sister, Emma, was already in college, so it was just me and dad left at home, trying to cope. It was hard, but we managed to support each other. Then, about a year ago, Dad started dating a woman named Stephanie. At first, I was okay with it. Dad seemed happy, and Stephanie seemed nice enough. "Alex, honey, how was school today?" Stephanie asked in this overly sweet voice as I walked through the door. "Fine," I mumbled, heading to my room. "Now, Alex," Dad said, "don't be rude to your stepmother." The word stepmother still made me feel weird. I forced a smile and replied, "Sorry, school was fine, Stephanie, lots of homework." "You look tired, sweetie, are you okay?" she asked, looking concerned, but I couldn't tell if she was being genuine. "I'm fine, just stressed about exams," I said, gripping my backpack tighter. Dad looked at me, worried. "Maybe you should cut back on some of your activities if school's too much." "It's not too much, Dad, I can handle it," I insisted. Stephanie stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Alex, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's okay to admit it. We're here to help." I just nodded, afraid I'd say something I'd regret. The truth was, I wasn't just stressed, I'd been dealing with depression for months. Dr. Martinez, my psychiatrist, had been helping me, and the antidepressants she prescribed were starting to work. But Stephanie had been hinting that maybe I was overreacting, as if my depression wasn't real. Later that night, I called my sister Emma. "Hey, little bro, how's it going?" "Not great, Stephanie's at it again." "What did she do this time?" "It's more what she doesn't do. She keeps suggesting I'm exaggerating about my depression, and now Dad's starting to believe her." Emma's voice grew firm. "Alex, listen to me, you know what you're going through, don't let them make you doubt yourself." "I know, it's just hard. I miss Mom, she would have understood." "I miss her too, kiddo. Look, I'm coming home next weekend. We'll talk more then, okay?" After hanging up, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Mom and wondering what she'd think of all this, about Stephanie, and about Dad. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Yeah?" Dad poked his head in. "Hey, can we talk?" I nodded, sitting up. He sat on the edge of my bed, looking uncomfortable. "Alex, Stephanie and I are worried about you. We think you might be putting too much pressure on yourself with school, and this depression stuff." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, it's not just talk. Dr. Martinez diagnosed me. The meds are helping," I said. He shook his head. "I'm not sure about those pills, Alex. Stephanie's been researching, and she thinks—" "Stephanie's not a doctor, Dad," I interrupted. "Don't raise your voice at me, young man," Dad warned. "We're just trying to help." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I know, Dad, but I need you to trust me on this, and trust Dr. Martinez, too." He sighed, standing up. "Just think about what I said, okay?" When I came home for summer break, I hoped things would get better, but as soon as I walked through the door, I felt the tension. "Welcome home, sweetie," Stephanie said with a sugary sweet tone, but her eyes were cold. "We've missed you so much." "Thanks," I mumbled, hauling my bags upstairs. That first week back was rough. Stephanie was always there, watching, commenting. "You look so tired, Alex. Are you sure college isn't too much for you?" "I'm fine, Stephanie, just readjusting to being home," I'd say, but her questions didn't stop. Every day, she made little comments about how I looked or acted. It was driving me crazy. Then one night, everything came crashing down. I was in the kitchen grabbing a snack when Stephanie cornered me. "Alex, we need to talk about your condition." I tensed up. "What about it?" "Well, your father and I have been talking, and we're worried you might be exaggerating your symptoms for attention." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Exaggerating? Are you kidding me?" Now, there's no need to get defensive," she said. "We're just concerned." "You don't understand anything about what I'm going through," I yelled. Dad walked in, frowning. "What's all this shouting about?" Stephanie turned to him, tears in her eyes. "Oh, honey, I was just trying to talk to Alex about his depression, and he blew up at me." "That's not what happened," I shouted. "She accused me of faking it." Dad's face turned cold. "Alex, that's enough," Stephanie's just trying to help. I stormed off to my room, slamming the door. My head was pounding, so I reached for my meds, only to realize the bottle wasn't there. Panicking, I tore my room apart, but I couldn't find it. I rushed back out. Where are my antidepressants? Stephanie and Dad exchanged a look. Alex, Stephanie said slowly, we got rid of them, for your own good. The room spun. You what? Son, we think it's best if you try to handle this without medication, Dad added. You can't do that, they were prescribed by my doctor. A doctor who clearly doesn't understand what you really need, Stephanie interjected. Dad, please, don't let her do this, but Dad just shook his head. I think Stephanie's right, Alex, you need to learn to cope without pills. The next few days were unbearable without my meds. I barely left my room, couldn't eat, and couldn't sleep. When Emma came home and saw me, she knew something was wrong. Alex, what's going on? She asked, looking alarmed. I broke down and told her everything. Her face darkened as I spoke. We're fixing this, now. She pulled out her phone. While Emma confronted Dad and Stephanie, I slipped out. Jake was waiting in his car around the corner. You okay, man? He asked as I slumped into the passenger seat. Not really, but I will be. Jake drove me straight to Dr. Martinez's office. When she heard what happened, she was furious. This is completely unacceptable, she fumed, writing out an emergency prescription. What they've done is dangerous and illegal. As we left the pharmacy, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Hello? Alex, it's your Uncle Robert. I hadn't heard from him in years. Uncle Rob, what's up? I've been trying to reach your dad, but he's not answering. Is everything okay there? I hesitated. Not really, Uncle Rob. Things are pretty messed up. He paused. Tell me everything, kid. As I talked, I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. After all that happened, I couldn't stay at home. Jake's family took me in without asking questions. You can stay as long as you need, Alex, Jake's mom said, giving my shoulder a squeeze. Meanwhile, Emma was determined. We're going to expose Stephanie for the snake she is, she declared, pacing around Jake's living room. But how? I asked, feeling hopeless. Jake grinned. We start digging. Everyone's got skeletons in their closet. We spent days searching social media, making calls, following every lead. Uncle Robert was a lifesaver, using his skills as a private investigator. I've got contacts who can help, he said over the phone. This woman's got a past. All right. During all this, I kept seeing Dr. Martinez. She was helping me learn to manage my emotions without meds until we could sort out my prescription. Deep breaths. Alex, she reminded me, you're stronger than you know. Weeks passed, then Uncle Robert called with a bombshell. Kid, you better sit down for this. Stephanie wasn't just manipulative, Uncle Robert said seriously. She's a con artist. 3 previous marriages, all ending in divorce after she drained their bank accounts. There are even reports of child neglect from her second marriage. I stared in shock at the documents Uncle Robert had sent. Wow. Emma was furious. We've got her. Dad has to believe this. But when we showed Dad everything we'd found, he shut us down. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're just trying to drive a wedge between me and Stephanie. I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense. Things only got worse from there. Somehow, Stephanie found out about our investigation, and she started spreading rumors around town. Suddenly, I was labeled as the unstable kid who was supposedly making up lies about his stepmother. I hit rock bottom. One night, sitting alone in Jake's guest room, I even thought about dropping out of college. I can't do this, I told Jake, my voice breaking. Yes, you can, he insisted. We're not letting her win. Then, just when things couldn't get any crazier, my grandmother showed up out of the blue. Nana? I said in disbelief as she walked into Jake's house. Oh, my sweet boy, she said, pulling me into a hug. I came as soon as I heard what was going on. Having Nana there felt like a breath of fresh air. She didn't try to fix everything or offer empty advice, she just listened. One evening, she looked at me and said, You remind me so much of your mother. She never backed down from a fight, either. Those words lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. Then, just as I started to feel hopeful again, Uncle Robert called with news that changed everything. Alex, I've been digging into Stephanie's current job, he said, his voice tense. She's been embezzling money from her company, serious fraud. I was stunned. This was the smoking gun we needed. What do we do now? I asked, my heart racing. We take her down, kid, Uncle Robert replied, once and for all. With that, Emma, Jake, and I spent days planning our next move. We need to do this right, Emma insisted, no room for error. We gathered all the evidence, financial records, witness statements, everything. Then we made our move. I'll never forget the feeling of walking into Stephanie's workplace with a folder in hand, my heart pounding. We need to speak with your CFO, Emma said calmly, it's urgent. What happened next was a whirlwind. Stephanie's employer was shocked, then furious. They called the police immediately. Watching Stephanie get led away in handcuffs felt surreal. This is all a misunderstanding, she cried, but it was over. Stephanie shrieked as they took her away, her mask finally slipping. Dad showed up at the police station, looking completely stunned. Alex, what's going on? They're saying. Stephanie. It's all true, Dad, I replied, feeling strangely calm. Everything we tried to tell you. The look on his face when he realized how wrong he'd been, I'll never forget it. Later, at Jake's house, Dad tried to apologize. Son, I'm so sorry, I should have listened to you. Can we try to fix this? Part of me wanted to say yes, to have my dad back, but another part of me knew better. I'm sorry, Dad, but no, I need to focus on healing and on myself. His face fell, but I held my ground. Years of therapy had taught me the importance of setting boundaries. The trial was hard, testifying against Stephanie, reliving everything she'd done, but seeing her face as the verdict was read was worth it, guilty on all counts. As she was taken away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was finally over. Life after wasn't easy. Dad became somewhat of an outcast. People in our town whispered about how he had enabled Stephanie and ignored his own son. Part of me felt sorry for him, but I also knew these were the consequences of his choices. Returning to college was strange. In a small town, news spreads fast. People knew bits and pieces of what had happened, but I kept my head up, focusing on my studies and my mental health. Dr. Martinez was proud. You've shown incredible resilience, Alex, she said during a session. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely proud of myself too. Question for you, if you were in my position, would you forgive a parent for choosing someone toxic over you and doubting your struggles? Or do you think keeping strong boundaries is the healthier choice? Share your thoughts below. Your experiences might help others going through similar situations. If you found this story meaningful, consider giving it a like. It helps get stories about overcoming toxic relationships and mental health struggles out there. And if you want to hear more, hit subscribe. Together, we can break the silence around family betrayal and mental health challenges. Remember, your mental health is important, and you deserve support. Thanks for being part of this community.
I spoke with police here, and they said that he legally has the right to record anything he wants. However, I am sure I have some right to privacy. When the police visited my neighbor regarding the camera, my neighbor did move the camera ever so slightly toward the street. Now, a month later, the camera is directly pointing into my bedroom window again. My home is about 50 feet away from his. It is clear that this is where it is recording. He has also threatened me when I have asked personally to move the camera, and he replied with my house, my rules, as well as a mention of a recording of me calling him the N-word. I didn't on said camera. I just want it pointed away from my bedroom window. I'm sure he can hear what goes on in the bedroom as well. What are my options? Am I allowed to put up a board on my property, blocking the camera view from my window? Honestly, that's about all I have left in the tank. Update 1. So a ton has happened since I last posted. I had mentioned in the comments that my neighbor had been basically using sound terrorism to harass us. I began writing in a log of each event that occurred, with the time, the date, the description, if I called the police I did for almost every one, and it began to show an alarming pattern. He was playing sounds at random times of the night every single night. After each major event of sounds, I would drop off a written statement to my local police station for the code enforcement officer. The city was now looking at charging him for noise violations based on my complaints. I took my 3-page log and copies of 7 signed statements and finally had enough of the police taking their time to work on the case against my neighbor. I dropped $95 on paperwork to begin an anti-harassment order against my neighbor. I made sure to explicitly mention the camera pointed in my bedroom window and the ongoing noises. He was served a temporary order that very day by the local police, and sure enough, the noises ramped up. Before our court date to discuss the anti-harassment order, we were subpoenaed to be witnesses for the noise violation. We also brought the former owner of the home as well as the person who lived on the other side of my neighbor as witnesses to his noise-making capabilities. My neighbor never showed to the court date, and at that point had $1,250 pending in tickets. His lawyer showed up an hour late, and the judge graciously accepted his plea to move the date a month forward. Disappointment. Then the date for the anti-harassment order came. Once again, my neighbor didn't show, and his lawyer begged for more time to look over the case. The judge was just and said that everyone has a right to defend their First Amendment rights, so he moved the court date for a month later as well. Disappointment number 2. The noises are continuing on the regular at this point, and we are trying to record them as best as we can on our phones. It was really hard to do because the noises were short and happened at random in the middle of the night. The date for the second anti-harassment arrived, and finally, we saw our neighbor come through the courtroom and sit in the back. When it was our turn to explain the situation, we made sure to present our call log, our statements and videos that we had as evidence against our neighbor. Our neighbor's lawyer tried to get us to give up the call log because he mentioned he was not aware of it before our court date. The judge basically told the lawyer to go fuck himself. The lawyer's only defense for my neighbor was that he worked long hours and couldn't possibly be awake in the middle of the night to terrorize us, and that conversely, we were the ones making the noises. We then brought up the fact that our neighbor had a security camera pointed directly at our home, and he should have plenty of evidence to prove we were indeed the noisemakers. The judge very confidently approved our anti-harassment order, stating no more noises, no more cameras in our windows or at us in general, and our neighbor is not allowed within 25 feet of us. He immediately moved the camera pointing in our bedroom window to being completely flush with the side of the house. Awesome. This was great news. We finally achieved some peace. And then the date for the noise violation trial came, just as lawyer showed up and made a deal with the city lawyer that one ticket would be paid in exchange for no appeal to our anti-harassment order and to throw out 2 tickets. It sucked, but they took the deal. Whatever. And all seemed well. Then, about a month after the anti-harassment order kicked in, the noises began, again, and the camera began to slowly point into our garage, back in the direction toward the bedroom window. This time, the police noticed something more alarming. A red light was going off in the tinted window directly below the camera on the outside of my neighbor's house. They shone their flashlight and spotted a lens. My neighbor had a camera inside his window pointed at my bedroom window the entire time the order was in place, and long before that. The officers told us to stay quiet. Don't be alarmed, but they now were actively seeking a search warrant for the property to seize any noise-making equipment and to take down the cameras, as he had broken the order. The next weekend, my neighbor was arrested and we got to sit outside on the front porch while they disassembled the cameras and seized speaker after speaker, megaphones, etc. from my neighbor's home. They said he had 4 foot of insulation surrounding the room with the camera, and the front door of the home was completely barred shut. Unfortunately, they just seized the equipment and will eventually give it back. My neighbor was out of jail the next day, and since they didn't have a search warrant for his hard drives, they couldn't place any voyeurism charges, despite my insistence. They even mentioned they saw me and my husband on a laptop of his. I'm just happy that the noises have stopped, and as far as I know, no more hidden cameras. I'm just glad I could update this crazy situation for you guys. I'm sure I'm not out of the woods yet. Update T. It's close to a year now that we've dealt with the worst of my neighbor. Almost a year ago, we achieved the success of having an anti-harassment order granted. That summer, he was arrested for harassing us, and he stopped with the cameras and the noises. But something was brewing behind those closed doors. Around early November 2017, we had a knock on the door one evening. It was an officer asking if we had heard gunshots in the area. We had not. Soon into our conversation, he mentioned it was our neighbor who called and complained. They were aware of the situation and assured us that despite the situation, they have to respond to all gunshot calls. I was honestly not surprised that after all the quiet, something started up again. The next day, a police cruiser parked across the street from our home. I was expecting someone to knock again and ask about gunshots. No one came to the door, and the officer sat across the street watching my home for over an hour. The next day, I emailed an officer I had been working with previously regarding the situation. The officer told me that my neighbor had been calling 911 every single day on my address for gunshots. By the time I got an email back, it had been a week. Every single day. This man was coming home from work, eating dinner, tending to daily life, and calling 911 on us for shooting guns. The officer said he would look into seeing if this counted as harassment through a third party. The new year came and went, and in early January, I emailed the officer back, and his response was simply that the city prosecutor wanted to set up a phone conference to discuss the plan going forward. The city prosecutor mentioned to me that at that point in time, my neighbor had still been calling 900 every day, even the morning of the conference call. She said they contacted all of my other neighbors to see if they heard any gunshots and asked if they would testify that they have not heard anything come from our property. They also plan to charge my neighbor with some counts of harassment and wrongfully utilizing emergency services. Part of his deal with the arrest over the summer involved him able to avoid jail time by having good behavior, and they are looking for their time back essentially. His arraignment date came, and his pretrial was set. Came and went. It's being continued until next month. I am worried that he will try to continue this case until the end of time. Our anti-harassment order expires soon, and we will have to drag him to court once again to renew it and spend more money. Things are starting to feel pretty dim again, and honestly, the recent continuance knocked the wind out of my sails. All I can do until I am called as a witness victim is wait. Update 3. Remember how I said that the city prosecutor was all on board to help me finish this? Well, things have changed. The second pretrial after the case was continued is coming up. I contacted the prosecutor to ask why the case was continued. Apparently, the prosecutor went on an extended leave of absence and gave the case to another prosecutor. Okay, no big deal. I was given the contact of the new prosecutor and emailed them to check for an update. No response. 2 weeks have gone by, and 2 emails were sent with no response from the prosecutor. I even contacted the prosecutor's assistant, and no one has gotten back to me. Dead silence. To say that I am disappointed is an understatement. I don't know what to do, because the original prosecutor was so gung-ho about finishing this case, and now I can't get a hold of anyone. This is so uncommon, because when I had questions before, usually I would get a phone call with an answer, and at least an email response. My neighbor keeps adding trash cans to the fence line. These are large, heavy-duty cans with lids. I really don't know what it's about, but it's making me extremely uneasy. This whole situation is seriously giving me anxiety, and I just want it to be over. Radio silence from the only people who are trying to help me is making things so much worse. What should I do? Update 4. So it's all over. The prosecutor called me and said, of course, they aren't wanting to plead guilty to all the charges, and instead of jail time, his attorney wants 30 days of house arrest, which is what he does already, just sits in his house and never leaves. The trial was pushed to July, and we are moving out of state around that time. I told the prosecutor that we wouldn't be here to be witnesses. I have no soul left or fight in me. Thanks for all your help, everyone. The justice system has failed us. Update 5. Hello all. Thanks for listening and following this ridiculous thread of events. My neighbor pled guilty to 19 counts using emergency services inappropriately, and 1 other charge they won't explain. He cannot talk to me or my husband, and cannot bother anyone on this property, ever. He is also required to have a mental health evaluation, which he was supposed to go do on his own when this started rolling. The result of breaking any of these rules will hopefully be jail time. Now is the new dilemma. He was outside today, looking at a brand new for sale sign on the house. Not kidding, and maybe this is just paranoia, but my realtor called and said someone had scheduled an appointment to view the home this evening at 6 p.m. We haven't told him about the situation because honestly we thought nothing was going to come out of this and we had lost. Now the new people that will be moving in when we sell are protected, but we figured to let sleeping dogs lie and let our neighbor be the first one to mess things up. We were put in the same situation with the last owner of the home, and it isn't illegal in WA to not disclose these things. I think my neighbor is trying to tour my home. I have no problem with him wanting to buy the home, but I am not interested in him snooping. I know my realtor will be monitoring him, but a part of me is wondering if he will be trying to take photos of my stuff, etc. I have partially lost my mind even considering that man will be in our home. What can I do? My husband was thinking about parking down the street when the appointment time was, and making sure I suggested a nanny cam, both of which are probably insane to do. I am afraid that telling my realtor will also result in a nightmare. I did it. It wasn't my neighbor that toured the home, thank God. But now we have a Nest camera set up, so we will know. Update 6. So my neighbor decided to throw up some nice floodlights pointed over his fence right at our bedroom window, right after his court date. In that time, we have sold the home and moved to an apartment and transitioned to our new destination, far, far away. He turned on the floodlights every night at 10 p.m., and they would clearly shine through the bedroom window, even with the blackout film, and really shone through our guest bedroom, where my mom stayed for a week to visit. Police came out and took pics and drove by several nights to confirm they were still up. Part of his plea deal is to not commit similar incidences and further harass us. This comes into play later. I called the police, and they ended up serving me papers saying I was required to be a witness in court. Court day came, they were asking for jail time, and my neighbor's attorney asked for a continuance because he didn't have time to review the new info. They granted it. Second week comes around, we rescheduled for a special hearing with a pro-team judge. Mistake. Today was the hearing, and the second time we all had to take off work to show up. The judge immediately told the city prosecutor, since she didn't have a formal briefing, that he was not familiar with the case and that it would not be heard today. Typically, the judge who does hear the city's cases is well informed, and the prosecutor objected to this, saying it is not a requirement. You knew what was on the docket today. The judge further mentioned that because specific charges were not filed and they were just asking for jail time given back onto the jail time they waived at the previous hearing. He wasn't interested in doing this today. He read the plea deal and said that similar incidences is too vague and should be thrown out, and he didn't know how shining lights on our property was similar to whatever he got in trouble for in the first place. Then he mentioned he had court in Seattle in 2 hours and wasn't interested in hearing my testimony today. Also, since we will be gone by October, he didn't see the issue in why we were even there. Since we moved, we can't be harassed anymore, so problem solved. I broke down in tears of sheer frustration. The prosecutor said I don't have to be a witness anymore, and they would talk to the usual judge in the case, and to keep in touch with her. When my neighbor walked out, he did a very dramatic prayer hands in the air, like he knew he won. I give up again. We're leaving. It's over. I will never get my day in court. I will never know what I did to this man to make him harass me so deeply. I will never get 2 years of my life back. I hate it. The only good thing out of this is the police report that we got after they raided his home last summer. Dude's a weirdo sexual deviant, even in the eyes of a very liberal and accepting Washingtonian.
I am female 19 and my parents' second child. I have 3 brothers, 21, 13, and 7, and a sister, 16. We grew up poor and our parents were often dependent on financial help from relatives, friends, etc., for raising us. This is because even though my dad has a mediocre job and my mom doesn't work, they just kept on popping out one kid after another. My parents are very religious and believe that children are a gift from God. Personally, I think that's total BS. My parents' reproductive choices wouldn't bother me if it hadn't caused mine and my siblings' lives to turn to shit. While growing up, we never had new clothes or toys. We had to accept handouts from family members who were better off. We never went out or did anything fun. To top it off, we were well aware that the rest of the family looked down on us for constantly asking for handouts. Now, my older brother and I have managed to get into good colleges and are looking forward to a future that would be better than our parents' lives. He and I were staying at our parents' place for a while due to the COVID-19 lockdown. One morning, my parents called all 5 of us into the living room. Mom said she had great news. The smile that was forming on my face died a quick death when she said, "We're pregnant." I lost my temper. I asked them how they could be so stupid and irresponsible. Do they not have enough financial troubles already that they have to bring in another mouth to feed? My older brother tried to calm me down, but I was livid. After a lifetime of scarcity, because of my parents' stupidity, they still hadn't learned their lesson. I asked them how they planned to provide for the kid. My dad told me I would have to give up the money our great-uncle had left me. He had left all 5 of us some money which only we could access when we turned 18. I said, hell no. That money would help pay for my college expenses. He called me selfish for not being there for family. I told them if they couldn't provide for the kid, they should get an abortion. My mom started crying and called me a heartless monster. Dad told me he was disgusted with me. I told them there was no way I was going to pay for their stupidity, and the only thing I would be willing to pay for is a termination. What I was really worried about was my siblings' lives getting even worse. My older brother and I have escaped our parents' clutches, but the others, especially my younger sister, will be expected to help take care of this baby. No teenager deserves to have their adolescence ruined by diapers a screaming baby. I know what it's like, as I had to go through that. It was expected of me to be an unpaid nanny to my younger brothers and sister. My older brother could go out with his friends and have fun, but I had to stay home and help give baths and feed the toddlers. I decided to get some family members involved so they could talk some sense into my parents. I called my mom's maternal cousin. She's one of my favorite people. When I told her that Mom and Dad were having another kid, she reacted with what? Again, I told her everything and how they expected me to hand over my inheritance. She said she was going to speak to my parents and told me not to sign over anything. I promised her I wouldn't. Of course I won't. I also called 2 of my first cousins, one of whom is an accountant, so she could explain to my parents how much of a financial liability this baby is going to be, and try to convince them to either abort or give it up for adoption. I moved out of my parents' home a few days ago. I was only going to stay there till the lockdown was relaxed, but I just can't bear to listen to my mom's nagging about how this baby is a blessing and that I want to kill it. I've moved into a friend's basement for a minimal rent. My mom's cousin paid them a visit about a week ago and tried to tell them they weren't doing this child any favors by bringing it into a life of poverty. My mom was very rude to my aunt and told her that a woman who chose to remain barren will never understand a mother's love. Oh, and my aunt never wanted kids, nor had any. One of the reasons she's my fave. My dad told her to get out. Aunt told me there was nothing she could do, but she did try. I didn't blame her. The cousin tried to explain the economic impact this kid would have, and my mom cried about how everyone was trying to take away her baby UF. The intervention didn't do shit. So now I've decided to cut contact with my parents. I just can't watch my family slide further and further into a hellhole. I'll be maintaining contact with my sister 16, just to make sure my parents can't brainwash her. My older brother is going to stay in touch with all of them, which is a good thing as he can act as a link between me and the other siblings if my parents ever forbid them from talking to me. Otherwise, I'm done with these people. At it. I want to thank all of you for your kind and supportive comments and for the awards as well. Relevant comments. My parents can't touch the money. Only my siblings can withdraw it when they turn 18. My sister will be 18 in a year and a half, and I've explained to her that she's going to need it for college. Hopefully I was able to convince her. My brother will be staying there till the lockdown is lifted. I'm glad he's there actually, as he can be my eyes and ears for what's going on over there. His inheritance has already been spent on his college expenses. Update. Yesterday afternoon, I got a call from my older brother. He told me that my mom has miscarried. This is hardly surprising as she's in her 40s. I felt a huge wave of relief wash over me. My siblings' lives would not be worsened by my parents' insistence on adding another mouth to feed on an already tight budget. My sister would not be asked to give up her inheritance so they could have money for their new baby. My brother told me my mom had been crying, and while I did feel bad for her, I was still glad to hear about the miscarriage. I feel like we all dodged a huge bullet. Bro asked me to move back in for a while to help comfort my mom. I told him I wasn't going to move in because 1, my college would reopen in a few days, and 2, I'm done with all the family drama. However, I did agree to come visit my mom, if only out of courtesy. In the evening, I went over to my parents' place. I took chocolate chip muffins for my mom, which I know she likes. My sister greeted me at the door and told me Mom had been in bed all day. After greeting my dad, I went into their bedroom. Mom was sitting up on the bed. I told her I was sorry about what happened and placed the muffins on the bedside table. She looked at me angrily, then threw the muffins at me. She screamed at me that she had lost her baby because of me. She said I had caused her stress and it's what caused her to miscarry. She said I was probably glad her baby was dead, which is true, but of course I didn't point that out. She called me a witch and said I had wished this upon her. She was screaming so loudly. All my siblings and my dad came rushing to the bedroom. She yelled at me to get out. I did. I hugged my older brother and sister. Before I left, my Dee told me my mom was right, that my cruelty caused her to miscarry. I told him that was a grossly unfair accusation and reminded him that at Mom's age, it was quite common to miscarry. Then I walked out. I'm so done with my parents and their stupidity. I can only hope they won't try for another kid. Story 2. Not telling my sister-in-law about the life insurance policy my brother left for me. 7 years ago, my brother Alan made a seemingly rash decision to marry someone pretty suddenly, Jan. From very early on, they had issues that she often brought to everyone. This is not how the family operates. And if I am being honest, she made everyone extremely uncomfortable multiple times by airing her grievances to anyone who would listen. Nothing major, no abuse or cheating or anything. Despite that, my family was warm to her because really it was Alan's life and decision. We accepted her and her child from a previous marriage and were thrilled when they welcomed a child together. I say I'm confident that, at the very least, Alan was leery of her because he called me out of the blue to remind me I was the beneficiary of his insurance policy and that he'd like me to use that money to create education funds for the kids. This conversation took place 2 years ago. Well, Alan died in an accident about 3 months ago. Jan has continued to utilize the family for help, which is totally fine. I went through the process with the life insurance company and submitted all needed paperwork, and everything seemed fine. I 110 to abide by Alan's wishes. Everything was okay with Jan until recently. Recently, Jan started acting outwardly hostile, accusing my and Alan's mother of stealing Alan's money. Jan, likely with the urging and help of a third party, went digging into information about life insurance and learned that there is a policy, though she could not get additional info as she is not the beneficiary. This appears to be where and when she decided to start acting hostile. She is outwardly confrontational to my mom, not. I attempted to sit down with Jan and explain things with the help of a translator, believing that perhaps a language barrier and a lack of understanding of how these things work were creating problems. She is not originally from here. She went off screaming about how she's his wife, and the money is hers and my mother is stealing from her. I tried to explain that my mother has nothing to do with this and I'm not stealing anything. She wants to hear none of it and seems to waffle between my mother forced my brother to make her the beneficiary she's not on it. And there was no beneficiary of theirs. She also does not find it acceptable that this money will be going toward the children's educational needs. I don't understand why. She stormed off. I was mortified by her behavior. I left, apologized to the translator, and haven't attempted to speak with her again, although I've seen the children for already scheduled events. So, am I the asshole for not sharing this information with her initially? Aita. Several people have mentioned Jan perhaps being concerned about finances. Her finances are fine. Additional funds have been dispersed to her and will continue to be. The children are in no danger, nor is she. Comments. I think you just found the reason why your brother made you the beneficiary and didn't tell her. NTA. If your brother felt she needed to know, he would have told her. Up is Ente and is 100 doing the right thing. But she lost her partner of 7 years, is going to be a single parent for the second time, but now with 2 kids, and she feels betrayed by her partner with no way to reconsider it. Some empathy by people in this thread is probably in order. I wish we still had awards to give. A little grace would be beneficial here. She just found out her late husband, the adoptive biological father of her children, did not trust her, and made plans that cut her out of money he hid from her after he passed. Wouldn't it be emotionally easier to rationalize that away, to say the mistrust came from someone else, than to believe someone you loved, trusted, relied on, and now have to grieve didn't, or couldn't trust you and excised you from plans allegedly for your kid's future without your involvement, excised you from his death? Grief is a bear as it is. Give her time. She may or may not ever see this situation differently. But no matter how right or wrong anybody is, it may be easier to mourn the ones you love by making someone else the villain. A 32 female was in a major car accident in January of 2021. Ironically, I had been taking my boyfriend 36 male to the ER because he had bleeding ulcers and ended up getting admitted to the hospital that night. This was still when they were enforcing COVID rules, so I was booted out of the hospital at about 300 in the morning. When I left, it was snowing, and not thinking hopped on the freeway, which wasn't a good idea. I had been driving a lifted Jeep Cherokee with mud terrain tires. Not the best ever for snowstorm driving. Getting off the freeway to go home, my brakes locked up, and I went into a light pole head first at about 60 mph. My Jeep did not have airbags, that was dumb. Needless to say, my car was totaled and I had to be extracted from the car by the fire department. This whole time I had been blacking out and losing consciousness, and I still get random flashes if I don't have all my memories from that night or several months after the accident. I got sent to the nearest trauma center, which was the same hospital I had just left. The nurses felt pretty bad about kicking me out. I ended up with a moderate to severe TBI, broken under my left eye, hairline fractures on my skull on the left side, bruising behind my ears, and black eyes. I had also cut open the inside of my mouth, had multiple lacerations all over my face. I broke my driver's side window with my face. Broke and bruised some ribs, had hairline fractures in my spine, broke my right wrist, my right knee, and my left foot, which required 2 surgeries, and I still need approximately 3 more. Needless to say, I was not doing great. I had recently gotten divorced the previous year and think that my entitled parents decided that my accident was my boyfriend's fault. I had to stay in the hospital for a total of 12 days in which case the mild family drama exploded into a severe family inferno. As I got closer to being released, all I had wanted to do was go home to my boyfriend and our kids. He had 2 previously, and I had 1. My entitled mother decided that wasn't what she wanted. On the phone, we sound almost identical. The whole time that I was in the hospital, she had been getting on the phone and impersonating me to my apartment complex management, even going as far as calling the cops to get my boyfriend and his 2 kids removed from my apartment. They were not on my lease yet. My also forged my signature on hospital paperwork and made up a story about how my boyfriend was abusive to me and got him banned from seeing me at the hospital. Again, forging my signature and writing a letter stating I didn't want to see him. This whole time I was still suffering from the effects of my TBI and was delirious from the combination of pain medications and brain fog from my head injury. Emmy even had the locks changed on my apartment without my consent. When I finally was released from the hospital, I was in a wheelchair because of my broken foot that had just had 2 plates and 10 screws surgically put in to hold it together, and an ankle to hip brace on my other leg from my knee being broken. I requested to go home to my apartment, but again implated that I couldn't go home because I had a 2nd-story apartment and couldn't take care of myself. So I got sent to stay at my parents' house, against my will, an hour away from home, because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to let my boyfriend come back to my apartment. I spent almost a whole miserable month there and refused to take me home even after I got crutches and was able to bear some weight. Initially, they refused to even go get my crutches from town because they didn't want me to have more mobility. Eventually, it got to the point where I had a friend come and pick me up from Em's house, so I could go home because they kept refusing to let me go. As I gained clarity in my mind and was taken off the intense pain medication, I was able to start rectifying the situations that Em made a huge mess of in my life. But I'm still trying to recover in some areas. I didn't find out until much later when medical bills started coming in that Em had called my boyfriend's health insurance company, impersonating me, and had me removed from his insurance. It took months of calling and badgering and footwork on my part to get the situation figured out and have the insurance pay for what they were supposed to pay for. It almost caused me to go bankrupt. At the same time, Em signed me up for minimal health insurance coverage through the state that I had no idea I was enrolled in, until I got a bill later stating that I back owed fees. Needless to say, I eventually completely cut both Em and my father out of life, after finding out how much they tried to control and how much they messed my life up. I ended up getting protection orders after they tried to break into my house, stalked me, and sent family and friends over to harass me. This whole incident was the straw that broke the camel's back. There was quite a bit of retaliation on their side that threw my life into a total tailspin ever since. But I'm sticking to my guns and not backing down. Update. Wow. I'm a little overwhelmed with how fast this post exploded yesterday. I was definitely not expecting that. I tried to keep up with as many comments and replies as possible, but I figured this might be an easier way to answer the questions that have been thrown at me. But first off, I definitely understand those who are skeptical about my post. It's more than a little bizarre, and I'm probably not the best at describing some of the situations. But I seriously appreciate all the great advice that has been given, and I'm looking at some of the other options listed in the comments, as well as what I am already doing. I think the easiest part for me to clear up is the questions about the insurance and my getting me off of the insurance I had with my boyfriend and putting me on the state insurance without my or my boyfriend's consent. As an adult, I can call in and cancel my coverage at any time with or without the policyholder's knowledge. There doesn't need to be a major life change in order to be taken off of a policy, usually just to get new insurance coverage or add someone to insurance. All my M needed was the insurance information and access to my information as well as his, which she did. She already had all of my personal information, including my SS number and my insurance information. This is how she signed me up for insurance coverage through the state as well. As some of you speculated, I'm sure it had something to do with the financial control. She could exert over me as well as trying to totally get my boyfriend out of my life. But honestly, I will probably never get the real answers to that. The reason why I didn't get the hospital bills immediately is a pretty easy explanation. First off, my car insurance coverage included medical bill payments, as well up to a certain amount of money. At first, going through the billing process, the hospital, orthopedics, anesthesiologists, ECT had to send their bills through my car insurance first, and then through my health insurance. I'm not 100% sure how that all works exactly, but I do know it was a mess, and it took multiple tries to explain to all the doctors what was already paid out, who got what money, and the next insurance to the bill, as well as it took weeks for them and myself to realize that while I was in the hospital, the insurance I went in with got canceled mid-hospital stay. So bills got sent out to the insurance I had to my boyfriend, which was followed by confusion from the hospital, insurance companies, and myself trying to figure out when it got cut off, what was covered, and what exactly happened. This takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. My M did tell me eventually what she had done with my insurance and how she changed it, but by that point, it was too late, and I was scrambling to try and rectify the situation and get as much covered from my hospital stay as possible. Even doing that, I still owe nearly $50,000 in medical bills. For those who had questions about how I had gotten on his insurance in the first place, when he started the job, he had the insurance from which we had qualified as domestic partners because of how long we had been living together and how long the relationship had lasted. For everyone wondering if we went to the cops or are filing charges or anything along those lines, it's a very long story, but yes, we are. I have a very good lawyer who actually represents myself and my boyfriend. It took me a while after I got home to my apartment to get to the point where I cut contact with him. When I finally got home, I tried to start seeing my boyfriend again, and we started the long process of trying to heal from what happened since I had essentially kicked him and his 2 kids out of my apartment in the middle of winter. They really had nowhere else to go. The kids ended up staying with friends for a while, and he stayed in his car and rented a hotel room when possible. I wasn't fully aware of what exactly was going on at the time, as M had my cell phone and access to my phone, and while I was at her home, she watched, like a hawk, to make sure that I wasn't contacting him. If I did, got berated, screamed at, and at one point did not have access to my phone, which was all very confusing, because I was on very heavy-duty pain medication, as well as having the confusion from the TBI. After I had made it back to my apartment and started to have more contact with my boyfriend, my M escalated, staying at my apartment even though I told her I was fine, showing up randomly, and eventually getting so angry that I refused to cut contact with my boyfriend that she threatened to kill him. That was when I grew a slight backbone and decided that it just wasn't going to get better. At that point, I filed for a protection, as well as my boyfriend, who copied my paperwork. When the first protection orders got dropped because we didn't have enough evidence, she had gotten a lawyer at this point, but we did not because we couldn't pay for a retainer. And this was before I had gotten smart enough to install cameras and a call recorder on my phone. My M went to the city's prosecutor's office and told them that she wanted to press charges of perjury against my boyfriend. This is where the friendship with the prosecutor started, and it was very hard for us to get anything to stick because M was getting in with our local PD and the prosecutor. Yes, they ended up going after my boyfriend and not me. Yes, that is selective prosecution. Yes, it is very illegal. At this same time, my mother and father are retired and apparently have nothing better to do with themselves. They had been in contact with my boyfriend's ex-wife, and at the same time we were getting beaten down with the perjury case. They also helped my boyfriend's ex-wife start a custody battle for his children. They'd been separated for some time, but the divorce had been stalled in court for several years at this point. They also filed in small claims court for lawyer and court fees after our first protection order was removed. My ex-husband had been allowing my daughter to see both of my parents still, which I did fight and which has probably spurred the grandparents' rights citation case that they filed during the same time. So we have been fighting one thing at a time and collecting all of the evidence that we can. All of the hospital paperwork, especially those that were forged, had to be requested from the hospital. The phone calls to the insurance company needed to be requested, and we needed our lawyer to get those. It wasn't something they were just going to give us, unfortunately. At this point, we have waited, though, almost all of the court filings my EM had thrown at us, and we are finishing gathering out evidence so we can counterattack at this point. At the time, our lawyer was telling us to be patient and gather as much as we could, as when we get through the thick of it, we can throw what we have into the system, but we needed and wanted enough to nail them to the wall. From here, there will be counter lawsuits, both jointly between myself and my boyfriend, and separate lawsuits, as well as submitting what we have for the identity theft. It's a very long process, and it takes a lot of time, effort, and money to get things moving. For those of you wondering if me and my boyfriend got back together and how that is going, yes, we did get back together. It didn't take long for me to start realizing what was happening when I wasn't being given the heavy narcotics, and my brain started the healing process from the TBI. It did take time for me to wade through everything that happened and try and recall memories. We did get back together, found a new place, and moved back in together with his 2 kids and my daughter. We have had some hard times, and of course we are both a little damaged from the whole process, but we both have counseling, are doing well. I hope this helps explain and expand on the questions everyone has been asking in the comments.
I'm 18 this year, and fairly recently on my own from my parents. I have a sister about 10 years younger than me. She was an unplanned pregnancy and nearly didn't make it to term. I don't know many of the details of how rough my mother's second pregnancy was since I was never told much. But I do know that it was so hard on her body that my mother could no longer have kids after my sister was born. She was in and out of the hospital repeatedly that year. My mother almost didn't survive the birth either. It made her and my father latch onto my little sister because she could have potentially never been born. And ever since then, I felt like I was just the other kid in the house, except for when they needed me as a free babysitter. The level of favoritism my parents showed long-term has me believing they were genuinely sick in the head for not noticing exactly what it was doing to me. And now it's rebounding on them, which I'll explain here. Starting with my 11th birthday, my parents wanted me to let my sister blow out my candles because she was 2 years old and cried at the sight of a birthday cake that wasn't hers. I didn't want to do it, but my parents forced me into it. They relit the candles for me to do it again after her. But the moment felt completely ruined. The same thing happened the next year, and the year after that, and so on and so forth. They just kept forcing it until it became the norm. My sister had to have presents on my birthdays as well. I never got any on hers either. And when I asked why, They just told me that I'm a boy, and boys don't need to worry about it as much. I know I was a kid, but did they really think that was a smart thing to say? Not really. And my parents would always choose a place my sister would like to be at more than me on my own birthday. Eventually, it became more like my sister was getting 2 birthdays a year, and I got none. Beyond this, my parents made their entire lives revolve around my sister. If there's something I wanted to do, my sister had to want to do it too. Otherwise, it was vetoed unless I could do it alone. I learned to just lock myself in my room with my video games because they didn't seem to bother me there. Unless my sister wanted to come running in to annoy me, hence why I put a lock on the door. My parents wanted me to remove it, but I freaked out because I was an angry teenager who was tired of being intruded on at any given time. My sister came running in more than once when I had no clothes on, and my parents were upset at me for being naked in my own room. When I pointed out how ludicrous that was, they withdrew their objection and just let me keep the lock. My sister developed quite the princess complex because of how she was being spoiled on a daily basis, and she was very demanding. So I stayed away from her as much as I feasibly could. Whatever excuse I could use to not have to deal with her, even if I had to make stuff up just to have time to myself. My parents hired a teen girl babysitter and I got more personal time. And then the babysitter quit because my sister wouldn't listen to her, and my parents tried to keep from paying by saying she did a bad job. The girl got some other people involved, and my parents finally paid her what they owed her. Then they hired another girl to babysit on the regular, and this one stayed. But my parents still made it clear that I was to be watching my sister any day I had free, which I went out of my way to make busy at my part-time job if I could. My sister treated me as her personal butler and ordered me around. She even had a stupid nickname for me she wouldn't stop using. Just hearing that nickname makes my blood boil. And if I didn't give her everything she wanted, she'd cry and call our parents. And then I'd be in trouble for mistreating her. We had many massive arguments because of this. And after I refused to yield anymore, my relationship with my parents devolved into barely any words spoken between us for some time. And yet, during my high school graduation, they had the nerve to brag to other parents that they were the reason I worked so hard. Well, they weren't wrong. But the reason they were thinking of was not the one that actually happened. I worked hard just biding my time for when I'd be free. But my parents acted like they'd done so much. Maybe they did before my sister was born. But afterwards, it was all about her. They didn't even ask me about school until parent-teacher conferences came up. I graduated with a B and average. And after my graduation, my parents just took me to some place where my sister would always have more fun than me, even though the trip was supposed to be for me. On my 18th birthday in July, though, things really boiled to the surface. Even though it was my 18th, it didn't feel like it was about me at all. I hoped to God that we were going to my favorite restaurant for once. But no, they had the party at the local knockoff Chuck E. Cheese, which is the only place like it nearby to us. So it was the de facto celebratory destination whenever anything big was achieved, including my high school graduation. I did say it was a place my sister would enjoy more than me. I was surrounded by kids half my age having parties, and I was so bored with nothing to do but eat mediocre pizza and play claw machines and dated arcade games for tickets to cheaply made prizes that brought me no joy. Then, when it was time for cake, my parents came out with one that was pink with white flowers on it. Sure, it had my name on it, but it was very obviously not a boy's cake, and there was only 10 candles. My parents lit the candles and set it right in front of my sister to blow out. That's when it finally happened. I just had this mental moment of all the pent-up hate mentally flashing before me, and then I just started ugly crying. I, an 18-year-old boy, was crying in front of the whole family. Everyone was so shocked that time seemed to just freeze. I got up and all of the stuff I'd been holding in for the past 8 years just spilled out like word vomit. The entire family got to be witness to this event, and when it was finally over, I just walked outside to sit by the family car. Several relatives trailed out after me to say they were sorry, and that they didn't know about the pink cake because my parents kept it covered till it was served. I said it didn't matter that they didn't know. They all sat back and watched as my life was taken over by Little Miss Sunshine for the past 8 years. I had no real birthdays or celebrations of my own. They were all about her. And then, on the biggest birthday of my life, they all expected me to just smile and nod like always while they handed my sister a cake that was entirely meant for her when it wasn't even her birthday. Some of them started giving me apologies, that they made the excuse that all this time they just thought I was awkward with it because my parents said I was. I told them I was never awkward with it. And my parents forced it on me every year till I just pretended to accept it. I spread my arms out and said to look where we were. Does it look like the place I wanted to celebrate my graduation and 18th birthday? No one even tried to stick up for me all this time. I'm just the other kid while my sister gets everything. I didn't even get to have any of my friends there because my parents stopped letting me invite them long ago after they tried to voice their opinions over my sister getting to blow out my candles. There are 365 days a year, and was it so bad to want one that was about me and not her? Instead, I'm treated like the greedy, entitled brat for wanting my own birthday. Then I just went back to ugly crying. My father came outside by that point to yell at me for making such a huge scene, because my mother was crying too. My sister was upset because I ruined her moment, and now everybody in there who saw thinks they're bad parents. I ended up yelling at him that they are bad parents and he should know exactly why. Well, after I said that, the rest of the family descended on him like a pack of wolves. Better late than never, I suppose. But I'd never seen anything like it before. My father was practically backed right up to the restaurant front door. And then most of the crowd flooded back inside with him to have it out with my mother too. My grandparents stayed with me and apologized for having their eyes shut so tight for so long. I don't know what was said to my parents in the restaurant, but it was roughly a half hour before they came back out. And when they did, they looked incredibly defeated. My mother was still sniffling after crying so hard, and neither of my parents could look me in the eyes. They both awkwardly apologized for what they did, and then offered to redo the party elsewhere. But that wasn't really enough for the crowd. One of my uncles ahemed rather loudly, and my parents said they'd never make me let my sister blow out my candles again, or give her presents on my birthday, or make any part of it about her. There was another ahem. And my parents also apologized for getting a cake that was obviously not even meant for me, and that they just felt like I wasn't worried about cake anymore at my age. Oh boy, was that the wrong thing to say. I became furious all over again, and yelled at them that my age was irrelevant. They've literally given my birthday to my sister, and had no good reason as to why, and they knew it. Then I said there was no point in redoing the party because it's too damn late. They clearly showed that I mean nothing to them. They ruined 8 years of my life till I became an adult. What future birthdays with them could I possibly look forward to? Well, my father started to get angry at me for saying that. But when the entire family yelled at him, he shut up. My grandfather told him I'm exactly right, and there is no possible way they can undo the damage done now. He said my parents were awful people, played favorites, and treated me like a black sheep ever since my sister was born. And what's more, they were all awful themselves because they just let it happen too. And I'm owed far more than an apology. I was owed my life back. My mother broke down again and tried to come closer to me while crying my name and apologizing. But I refused to let her anywhere near me, and half the family body blocked her from getting close. I just said I couldn't take this anymore and started to walk away. One of my aunts chased me down and brought me back. I could hear multiple family members yelling and cussing at my parents over what happened. But I was so upset, I couldn't even feel happy for any bit of justice after all this time. Also, where was my sister when this was all going on? She was still in the restaurant all by herself, eating cake and ripping open presents that were there for me. And if anyone was wondering, yes, my parents served her some cake after I cried and walked out. You'd think doing that wouldn't be their primary focus in the moment, but they were called out on it later. My grandparents got me to calm down and sit in their old minivan while everyone else cleared out the party. My sister threw a huge tantrum after being caught opening my presents. one of which was a brand new smartphone that she threw against the wall and broke because she wasn't allowed to keep it. She literally just got a brand new phone on her own birthday a few months earlier. I ended up being so upset that I was ranting that I never wanted to celebrate my birthday again, and my grandparents let me stay the night over at their house. When I came home, I still didn't speak to my parents. My mother just kept crying because I wouldn't talk to her. And my father was as closed-mouthed as me. The following weekend, my grandparents convinced me to go with them out to dinner. And when we got there, I was surprised to find a whole new party waiting for me. My parents were there, and they kept up with having the "don't hate us" smiles on their faces almost the entire time. There was a big chocolate cake with 18 candles on it. And there was even a banner with my name. They called it my happy belated birthday graduation party because I didn't really get either this year. I did kind of have to pretend to be happy. One good party doesn't undo 8 years of favoritism, or even make a dent in it really. And where was my sister? She was sitting at the table with her arms folded and her lip curled because it wasn't all about her like it used to be. And rather than sing happy birthday for me, they just sang an altered version called Happy Day. Then as soon as I blew out the candles, my sister screamed. I mean, an ear-bleedingly loud little girl scream. My parents had to rush her out, and then bring her back in later looking more upset than ever. She quietly pouted in her seat for the rest of the party. I did still get a new smartphone as well. And my sister got hers taken away, among other things for what she did at the prior party. But the smartphone wasn't all. The whole family had chipped in and gotten me a car. It was just an old white Volvo, but I loved it the moment I laid eyes on it. My grandfather knows a thing or two about cars and fixed it up himself. I was so happy, but my sister clearly was not, because she let out another one of those screams. She started having a massive tantrum and demanding a car too. My mother had to take her into the bathroom, and they didn't come back out for a while. My father just went back to looking defeated. My sister had effectively ruined their attempt at trying to look good in front of the whole family. Multiple family members also had strong words for my parents that my sister was acting that way because they raised her to be a princess-spoiled brat. I obviously started driving the car around right away. But only days later, my sister actually vandalized the car by taking a hammer and breaking 2 of the side windows and cracking the windshield to the point the car was undrivable. My parents managed to stop her before she did any more damage. But she screamed bloody murder when they grabbed her and took the hammer away, then tried to bite them. Oh, everyone was furious with my sister, especially my grandparents, because my grandfather had put so much work into that car, and my sister ruined it while having a massive tantrum. My grandparents had spoiled my sister so badly that she couldn't mentally comprehend that I could have something she couldn't. And several other family members laid into my parents about how they were setting my sister up for failure by making her an entitled brat that expects the world to be given to her. And she's going to have a terrible adult life because they won't put their feet down and teach her some respect. Well, her actions didn't go unpunished. My sister was grounded for the rest of the summer, and effective of the new school year was sent to boarding school. My mother cried like a baby about it too. But my father had to be adamant that it was the only way to start undoing the damage they'd done. Yes, they fully acknowledge they are at fault. It was kind of hard for them not to, since no one sided with them at all. My sister is absolutely miserable at that school. She hates the clothes, she hates the rules, and she's been lying almost constantly. But with cameras almost everywhere now, she's not getting away with any of it. Our parents tried to visit her a few times, but she just screamed at them for putting her in that place. From what I hear, this may be her school life till she's 18 years old. My parents did pay to fix my car. They had an auto glass company replace the windows and windshield, and it looks just as it did before. In August, my grandfather came to me and said if I was interested. He found me a job working for a friend, but it was 40 miles away, so I'd need to move out of my parents' house unless I wanted that commute. I was all for moving. Finding a first apartment wasn't so easy, though. I had to get approved for a credit card just to get accepted for a studio. But I got it. And I have been living where I am now since September. My parents keep trying to contact me, but I rarely speak to them. Any time we do speak, I just feel awkward and uncomfortable. My grandfather has suggested that they simply don't want to acknowledge how badly they fail as parents, and trying to get me to forgive them will make them feel better about themselves, or something like that. But I'm not going to forgive. Not any time soon. I'm finally happy and away from them. Now they've got nothing. They don't have me, and they don't have my sister. And my parents had to take more hours at work because boarding school for my sister is not cheap. Nor can I imagine was the party they had to throw for me, or the repairs to my car. Empty house, angry relatives, and the only thing they have left is their work. Feels like incredible misery to me, and I don't take delight in it. But it is the result of their own actions after all. Edit. I'd like to thank everyone for all the awards I've gotten. It really means a lot to me. I know my post was long and a lot to read, but I just needed to get the whole thing out, and I feel a lot better after having done so. I noticed a few calling this post fake in the comments in various ways. I do not blame you. I'd be highly skeptical reading this and wondering the same things in your shoes. But I lived it. Some parents just really are like that. I've also been contacted by a few people who went through similar and even way worse situations. With all the bad parents out there, is it really all that unbelievable as to what mine did? Granted, the whole family running back into the restaurant to have words with my parents did seem like a stretch. But I come from one of those close-knit families where we stick together a lot and do things in groups, and it can very easily turn into an entire group against one person at gatherings. I've seen a drunk cousin be surrounded and then removed from the party to sober up in another room because he was being highly inappropriate. I'm not exactly a fan of group mentalities myself, but it ended up saving me because my parents were shamed beyond words for what they'd done. They couldn't even form a proper reason as to why they did what they did to me without sounding like even worse people. So they basically surrendered, saying they have no excuse and are heavily trying to get on my good side. And while a lot of you are praising my relatives for how they helped me, I'm pretty sure a lot of that help was out of shame. They were there for most of those 8 birthdays, save for 2 years because of COVID. But in those other 6, they didn't do anything. They had disapproving looks on their faces that my sister got to blow out my candles. But they just stayed quiet. Why? Well, my dad is the son of the head of the family, my grandfather. And my grandfather is a fairly intimidating person. Be on his good side, and he'd do whatever it takes to help you. Be on his bad side, and the entire family hates you. A good reason why I don't like group mentalities. But once my grandfather basically said they were all at fault for not doing anything to help me for years, they all felt shamed. And they all chipped in for the cost of my car. With so many relatives, they didn't have to donate much each to afford it. I had the receipt for the car when I registered it in my name. They'd bought it for $2,000 and then put more into it for some parts and tires. My grandfather personally gave it a tune-up and changed the fluids. My grandmother deep cleaned the interior. I'm extremely thankful to them all. But I still want to distance myself a bit. I need time to work things out on my own. And I probably won't see my parents again until Thanksgiving or Christmas. Some have also compared my sister to that character Eric Cartman from South Park. And it's a pretty close comparison. My sister is chubby because my parents fed her a lot of junk food. She hates eating anything healthy. I once saw her put gummy bears on mashed potatoes. The thought of eating that combination turns my stomach. Her poor diet also made her spend long periods in the bathroom. My parents had to buy fiber snacks for her to eat just to remedy that. And I don't think they were cheap to get the ones that actually tasted good. My sister is also extremely bossy and likes to think she's in charge. She ordered me around near constantly, which is why I often locked myself in my room to get away from her. She lost a lot of friends for being so bossy and controlling, and my parents would just tell her that the other kids were just jealous of how special she was. My sister even referred to herself as a princess often, and the epic tantrums she had when not getting her way do remind me of Eric Cartman. I know my sister isn't stupid either. She doesn't try very hard at all and had a C average in school. If she actually applied herself, she'd probably be a straight A student. Edit 2. It looks like I've been banned from this subreddit. Not sure what I did. But maybe I made the post too long. Either way, I can't answer comments anymore. Sorry. But I do thank everyone here that gave me positive feedback from the bottom of my heart. Thank you all.
I am 19-year-old female, have 3 brothers, 27, 28, and 32. My oldest brother, Ave, got married to Sarah in May. I study halfway across the world from my hometown where my family are. I got really sick a few months ago and rushed to the nearest hospital. Turns out they don't accept my insurance, and I had to pay out of pocket. I was your 50 short and called everyone I could, but no one was picking up. I then called my oldest brother, Dave, because he always picks up, and asked him to send me your 50, and I would send it back once I get paid in a few days. He told me not to be ridiculous, and he didn't need me to pay him back your 50. Sarah called me that night and asked how I was doing. After the chit-chat, she asked if I could ask someone else the next time I need money because my brother is a married man. I was shocked, but I apologized and said I offered to pay him back. She said it's fine, but next time I should plan my finances in advance so I won't have to rely on a married man. It's my birthday soon, and Dave called to ask what I wanted. I said nothing and that I was fine, but I appreciated him asking. My other brother called to ask what I want, and I said I wanted some money to heat my apartment. I couldn't afford to heat it this month. He was baffled that I was so broke, I couldn't afford heating, and I wasn't saying anything. He started tearing up on the phone call with me and ended the call and sent me $500 later. I guess he told Dave about the call with me because Dave called me and started interrogating me on why I just told him I didn't need anything, and then asked my youngest brother. He sounded offended and asked why I feel like I can't rely on him. I asked, haven't you spoken to Sarah about this? He was confused on what I meant, and I told him about the conversation I had with Sarah after he sent me the year 50 for the hospital. He said he'd call me back, but he hasn't. A cousin of mine sent me a message a few hours ago saying I was a bitch for meddling in their marriage and that Dave didn't owe me anything. I was like, when did I say Dave owed me anything? I have never relied on him for anything, nor do I plan on it. I mean, I feel bad that Dave and Sarah are fighting it. I can't help but feel weirded out that Sarah did that behind his back, and he had no clue. I've been extremely anxious, and I can't stop shaking. Aita. Update 1. Again, I hope this reaches some of you lol. So my middle brother called me yesterday and asked me to explain what's been going on, and I did. He's always had quite the temper and got very angry about the Sarah situation. He mentioned how Dave is paying the rent for Sarah's 22-year-old brother's apartment. So for Sarah to ask me not to ask Dave for anything at all was so messed up when her own brother is getting his rent paid every single month by Dave. TBH, this made me mad. It's okay for Dave to support her brother, but God forbid he sends me your 50 for an emergency, right? Anyway, Dave called me, and we had a heart-to-heart conversation. I explained to him what I've been going through here, and he was silent for a while. I did mention that if I was in urgent need of something, I still had my other 2 brothers to ask, so it really wasn't that terrible. He said he feels so guilty that I was suffering and he didn't know. He said he won't tell me the details about his discussion with his wife, but he was heartbroken that she would even think of telling me not to rely on him, and has asked her to give me an apology, which she said she did. But at the time of the call, I hadn't received anything. I said I haven't gotten an apology from her, and he told me to check my messages again. Still nothing. He was silent for a while and just sighed. I also mentioned the text my cousin sent, which he asked me to forward to him. He said he felt so bad that people so much older than me were treating me like this, and he will deal with so it never happens again. That was this morning. I got a message from Sarah 10 minutes ago. Not sure how that's meant to be an apology, but to summarize, she said, "I'm sorry if you took what I said, as you can't ever rely on your brother. He's your brother, and I would never intentionally try to make you feel like he couldn't do anything for you. I'm also hurt that you couldn't speak to me if you had a problem with it. We could have solved eyes as sisters. Now what ETF am I meant to say to that? I know she'll make time the villain if I don't respond, but honestly, what on earth is that?" Update 2. Ladies and gentlemen, shit might just hit the fan for real this time. So I mentioned this in a few comments, but for those that haven't seen it, Sarah has this secret Twitter account that I follow her through a burner account. It doesn't have her picture or name, but I know it's her because my cousin had that account on Sarah's birthday saying happy birthday. Even with what she tweets, yeah, I could tell it was her. Anyway, she replied to a tweet of a woman who tweeted about how she has no in-laws because her husband is an orphan with no siblings, and this bitch Sarah replied saying goals. Like, I don't understand how you could love your partner and wish they had no family unless the family were genuinely toxic or something but this was a step too far, Amo. She can dislike us all she wants, but tweeting this weird shit is so childish and petty to me. You wish your man had no family because of an incident over 50. Someone get this lady some help. Anyway, I sent it to my other 2 brothers, not Dave, and one of them forwarded it to him. Long story short, Dave was staying with my other brother for a few days after that day, and now he's moved back into his house, but Sarah is back in her hometown. I haven't spoken to Dave about it because I'm sure he's going through it, and he isn't the type to speak about his marital issues to me, so he wouldn't give me the tea anyway. But things do not look great. Not sure if this is relevant, but my other brother told me about an incident where Dave and Sarah had a sort of small argument months ago on the dinner table because Sarah was making fun of an old man she saw at the supermarket who was buying pads. She said she can't believe a woman in his life would embarrass him like that. Dave said, "It's not embarrassing, and no one cares about men buying pads anymore." He mentioned that him and my other 2 brothers have done it for me multiple times. She then said something along the lines of, "You guys are going to make her incapable of doing anything for herself if you carry on like that." My other brother said, "She's our little sister. We're meant to do things for her. And no one cares about periods and pads except you." Dave said something to shut that whole conversation down, but she wasn't too happy about it and was silent the rest of the night. I'm not sure why she gets so annoyed when they do anything for me. Final update. Ladies and gentlemen, shit might just hit the fan for real this time. So I mentioned this in a few comments, but for those that haven't seen it, Sarah has this secret Twitter account that I follow her through a burner account. It doesn't have her picture or name, but I know it's her because my cousin had that account on Sarah's birthday saying happy birthday. Even with what she tweets, yeah, I could tell it was her. Anyway, she replied to a tweet of a woman who tweeted about how she has no in-laws because her husband is an orphan with no siblings. And this bitch Sarah replied saying goals. Like, I don't understand how you could love your partner and wish they had no family unless the family were genuinely toxic or something IK. But this was a step too far, Amo. She can dislike us all she wants, but tweeting this weird shit is so childish and petty to me. You wish your man had no family because of an incident over your 50? Someone get this lady some help. Anyway, I sent it to my other two brothers. Not Dave, and one of them forwarded it to him. Long story short, Dave was staying with my other brother for a few days after that day, and now he's moved back into his house, but Sarah is back in her hometown. I haven't spoken to Dave about it because I'm sure he's going through it, and he isn't the type to speak about his marital issues to me, so he wouldn't give me the tea anyway. But things do not look great. Not sure if this is relevant, but my other brother told me about an incident where Dave and Sarah had a sort of small argument months ago on the dinner table because Sarah was making fun of an old man she saw at the supermarket who was buying pads. She said she can't believe a woman in his life would embarrass him like that. Dave said it's not embarrassing, and no one cares about men buying pads anymore. He mentioned that him and my other two brothers have done it for me multiple times. She then said something along the lines of, "You guys are going to make her incapable of doing anything for herself if you carry on like that." My other brother said, "She's our little sister. We're meant to do things for her, and no one cares about periods and pads except you." Dave said something to shut that whole conversation down, but she wasn't too happy about it and was silent the rest of the night. I'm not sure why she gets so annoyed when they do anything for me. Sorry for how long this is. My wife's sister made a pass at me at a recent family gathering, and I have no idea what to do. For context, I think my wife Jenna is absolutely gorgeous, but she has some really negative body image issues. This is in large part because of her sister, who is very conventionally attractive, as opposed to Jenna's more unconventional but aimu striking beauty. Mary was a successful model until a couple years ago, and now works in the fashion industry. In our early days of dating, when I would tell Jenna she's beautiful, she would always say, "Just wait until you see my sister." When I did finally meet her family, she would randomly press me for weeks to talk about her sister, whether I thought she was more attractive than her, etc. I always told her the truth, that I think Mary is attractive in a boring way, and that I think my wife is much more beautiful and interesting to look at. She wouldn't let it go until I confronted her about how uncomfortable it made me and asked her what was going on. This is when she told me that she always had a chip on her shoulder about her looks because of being compared with her sister growing up. They fell into the classic smart and a half, pretty one dynamic their whole lives. She also said Mary had a habit of being flirty with all of her exes and warned me that it would happen to me eventually. She then started sobbing and begging me to not cheat on her with her sister, to which I forcefully said I would never cheat on her with anyone, let alone her sister. I've been crazy about my wife since day one, and there's literally no woman on earth who could come close to her. I honestly didn't believe her about the flirting at first. I assumed it was just an extension of her insecurity, but I was wrong. Whenever we get together with my wife's family, Mary always finds ways to touch me and make little innuendos comments about me or my body. It's super uncomfortable for everyone, especially my wife, and I've called her out on it before. She'll cool it for a while, but eventually start doing it again. It's been 6 years of this, and every time it happens, my wife is upset for days, and I have to do a lot of reassuring onto the current problem. A few days ago, we were at my mother-in-law birthday party, and Mary asked me to help her grab some things from the garage. As soon as we walked into the garage, she turned and pressed me up against the door with her whole body and started trying to kiss me. I immediately pushed her off and asked her what the F she was doing. She started giggling and saying she was just doing what we both have been thinking and kept insisting, "You know you want to." I told her she was out of her mind and ran out of there. I went straight to my wife and told her we were leaving. The whole ride home, she was asking me what was wrong. I wasn't sure whether to tell her because I knew how much it was going to hurt. But I also thought Mary would probably try to spin it as me making a move on her, so I knew I had to just say it. I told her everything, and she cried the whole way home. For the last several days, Mary's been calling and texting my wife, doing exactly what I thought she would do, even telling my wife that I said Mary was the hottest girl I've ever seen, which I had to assure my wife 1,000,000 times that I did not and would never say, even though she believes my account of the situation. She's been a complete wreck the last several days. She's hardly eating. She pulls away from my touch when I try to hug her or just hold her hand. She says she feels hideous and disgusting, and I don't know what to do. This is the lowest I have ever seen her, and it hurts to see how much she's hurting. I have no idea what to do to help her heal from this. Update. I got a few requests for updates, so here it is. I first want to thank everyone so much for your advice. It was extremely helpful and gave me a lot to think about. I'm especially thankful for the folks that asked me how I was doing. I realized that I have literally never had a chance to check in with myself after these things happen. And I've actually been holding a lot of frustration and resentment about it all. I've been harassed for years, and it has either been brushed off or it's been eclipsed by the impact it has on my wife. I don't blame her for it. But this has been a good lesson in me, not burying my feelings for the sake of others, even for her. I also want to clarify a couple of things that came up. Several people asked about how my wife's family feels about all this, and I explained in a comment that her parents are toxic and treat Mary as the golden child, even though my wife is a freaking neuroscientist, amazingly talented musician, speaks 3 languages fluently and another 2 conversationally. My wife and her family are seriously the only people who don't seem to understand how exceptional she is. I remember meeting one of my wife's family friends and talking to them about her research, and they said, "Oh wow, her parents just told us she works at a university," whereas my parents literally introduce her as the family genius to everyone. It makes me so fucking angry to think about how her asshole family has stolen her shine her whole life. She's literally a Renaissance woman, but all they care about is looks and money. Some folks asked me why I would ever put myself in a situation alone with Mary given everything she's done. I have no good answers for that other than I never thought she would actually try to do anything. That possibility just didn't exist in my head. I realize now that I should have seen this would happen eventually, and that I should have been less concerned with keeping the peace and more concerned with shutting Mary's shit down before it escalated to this point. Hindsight is 20/20. Anyway, on to the update. The night I posted, I told my wife that if she wanted to try to repair her relationship with her sister, I would respect that, but that I don't feel comfortable being around her for the foreseeable future. I said Mary has obviously been deeply jealous of my wife her whole life because she is a hollow, ugly person whose entire value has an expiration date, while my wife actually has substance. I said that I think her whole family is toxic and has done nothing but put her down her whole life, but that only she can decide whether she still wants them in her life. I also told my wife that while I don't blame her for her emotional reaction, her insecurity is something that she needs to work on for our relationship to be healthy. What Mary did was sexual assault, and she's been sexually harassing me for years. But I've consistently put aside my own feelings about this problem because of how it affects her, and that has prevented me from getting the support that I need too. I told her that her reaction only serves to punish herself and me for her sister's behavior, and there's no reason to give her that kind of power. I also told her something that a commenter said that really resonated with me. The only people who have ever considered her second best are her and her family. Everyone else sees her for who she really is. She was crying the whole time and agreed that she needed to go to therapy to work on her insecurity. We were able to find a therapist who specializes in body image, self-esteem issues to work with her individually. And we're looking for a couples therapist too. My wife sent a message to her parents and sister that explained exactly what happened and told them she would reach out to them if she ever feels ready to repair their relationship. We blocked all of them everywhere, but Mary has of course been spamming my family and our friends with nonsense, claiming I attacked her, I'm a drug addict, I abused my wife, all kinds of bullshit that thankfully nobody believes. My wife is still down in the dumps, but I can see that things are getting a little better. She's eating and sleeping more, and she's cuddling with me in the mornings again, which is nice. Now I'm planning a surprise getaway for us this weekend. We're going to one of our favorite places, and I'm going to wine and dine her and try to make her feel like the goddamn queen she is. I want to thank you all again for your help. You really helped me understand the severity of the problem, and again, thanks for helping me connect with my own feelings about all this. Y'all are the best. TLDR, going to therapy. We're going no contact with her family for the foreseeable future. I'm going to woo the hell out of my wife this weekend. If I uninvite my 32 female sister-in-law, 30 female, I'll call her Tina from my baby shower because I think she's in love with my husband. My husband, 33 male, and I met each other at a ski lodge 9 years ago. I was with my young daughter and a female friend and her child. My husband was with his 2 brothers and 3 sisters and a few friends. There was a singing competition, and both of us were set up by our friends to enter it. Sparks flew during our duet, and the rest is history. Back to our first meeting. This was the first time I caught on to my sister-in-law disturbing behavior. After the singing competition, he and I went to the cafe to chat. His middle sister, Tina, who was adopted at birth, came storming up to us and demanded he come back to their group. She never looked at me and whined when he shut her down. She ran off crying and apparently took her sister's room keycards and locked them out, so they had to stay with the friends in their room. Fast forward to when we bought a house together. We had a housewarming party and invited family and close friends. Tina showed up in a sexy club outfit. She ignored me the entire time and hung all over my husband, EVUF at the time. She kept recalling tales of them when they were little and how close they were. She'd kiss him on the cheek, hug him, and touched his arm when laughing. He was visibly uncomfortable, so I stepped in. At first, I just thought she had a crush on him, but the way she was acting looked like she was the girlfriend and not me. She was going around telling everyone that he used to say he never wanted to have kids, but now he's playing daddy to my daughters. One of my friends said she thought Tina was weird for talking about how hot his modeling photos were when he did print work back in college, and that her favorite photo was of them at a beach in Hawaii during a family vacation a few years back. The most bizarre thing she told a few people was that he had never dated a woman of color before, and now all of a sudden he's in love. It's only bizarre to me because she's biracial. So I don't know why this would bother her, unless she's jealous of me because she wished she were me. Then things go south at the end of the night when he gets down on one knee and proposes to me. She started crying and ran to the restroom. Their dad went to check on her and then drove her home. I knew exactly why she was upset, but my husband always equated her behavior to jealousy because she never had healthy relationships. After that tantrum, she skipped our wedding, baby shower, our children's birthday parties, and other family events that we attended. I was fine with extending invitations because I knew she wasn't going to show up. She had some sort of mental breakdown and was in and out treatment for years. Now I have to say, I wish nothing but the best for her, and I don't know what kind of issues she's going through, but I don't want her disrupting our peace. I'm currently pregnant and our baby shower is at the end of this month. I'm having it a few months early because I'm at risk for going into labor early, like I did with my other 2 children. My mother-in-law called to RSVP and stated Tina would be riding with them, and if it was okay if she brought her new boyfriend. I was surprised because we hadn't seen her in years, but I was apprehensive to agree. Eventually, I did agree and hoped that she resolved whatever caused her so much distress when she was around my family. Well, it took all of 24 hours for her to start her nonsense. She texted my husband paragraphs at 3 a.m. telling him how she felt about our family. First, she went on to say how much she missed them being close and how I came in and destroyed their close relationship when I barely said 50 words to her in 9 years. She asked him if he was happy with his life because, again, he used to say he never wanted kids or to get married. She then asked if he thought about her in all this time, and if he could meet up with him before the shower and talk alone, face to face. That was the last straw for me. I asked my husband if he knew she was in love with him, and he just shrugged and said he didn't doubt my theory. Apparently, when she was 11, she asked if they could cuddle and kiss, and he said no. He admits her behavior since then has always been weird and dramatic, but he didn't pay her much attention because there were many siblings and they all hung out all the time. I asked him if he could uninvite her and this new boyfriend because I think she's going to bring drama to our baby shower. He said he wants to talk to his parents first to see what kind of state she's been in, but I know in my gut that she's ready to ruin our day with her theatrics. So am I the asshole for wanting to uninvite her to the baby shower? Edit. For those of you wondering if anything intimate ever happened between them, the answer is no. I am 100% certain of this. He has a total of 3 adopted siblings, 2 a faux and 1 May. He says he sees them as blood-related siblings because the 3 of them were adopted at birth. He's the second youngest, and they're all within 4 years of each other, so all he knows them as siblings. He said he chooses to ignore her because she's always been dramatic. He's always worried about her physical safety because she's suffered from depression for as long as he can remember, so he tries to handle things gently. He's not opposed to uninviting her, but he does want to know what his parents think about her mental state and whether she can behave. Second edit. So I keep seeing something about High School Musical. I'm a little too old to have watched that show movie, but didn't know about that plot. I changed some details of how we met so this post wouldn't be immediately recognizable, but it's very much, unfortunately, my life right now. My husband is on his way home right now, despite having another 3 hours left at work because his phone kept blowing up. He didn't sound good on the phone, but he wouldn't tell me what was wrong. I don't want to call back his mom and other sister to ask what's going on, but I'll try to post an update when, hopefully, we come to a final solution because I'm stressed and over this. Update. This will probably be my last update since my husband, and I decided that we need to be completely removed from sister-in-law drama, so we can focus on having a healthy pregnancy and family life. I have an appointment with a primatologist, a high-risk prenatal doc tomorrow morning that was scheduled weeks ago to check on the baby. Thank you to those who were concerned about me and the baby, so I don't even know where to start. So I apologize if this update seems all over the place. I also have to point out for the person who went through my comment history, I switched the numbers, genders, and event details so I wasn't as easily identified in real life. I have a professional license, so if someone recognized me and thought I was being unethical due to the nature of the post I've avoided certain verbiage, because of my job, I could be brought in for a review, which I would much like to avoid, so I'm sorry I can't be 100% truthful with all of the details. I tried my best to keep the most important information as factual as possible. My husband ran home because Tina blew up his phone, texting and calling. Now, my husband always texts or calls me on his lunch break to check on me, even before the pregnancy, so I knew something was wrong when he didn't. Since he left Tina on red, she started calling and sending a slew of unwarranted and degrading texts about me and our children. So basically Tina being Tina. He didn't run it by me, but he sent her a long paragraph, which he showed me when he got home, basically telling her off and told her that he would rather never speak to her again than listen to her talk bad about our family. He told her she would never be invited to any of our family functions and that she needed to check herself back into the hospital if she thought their sibling relationship was ever closer than it actually was. He closed it by saying he would let the family know the reason she was uninvited and that he hoped she's either seeing a therapist or would find one immediately. I'm not surprised at his response because the things she said pushed him to that breaking point. I think the worst thing she said was that my 2 miscarriages years ago, which would have been our first child together, was caused because we don't actually belong together, and that my body couldn't even carry any of my children to term 32 and 33 weeks deliveries. I expected her to bring something like this up, but I could tell it really hurt him, and that's why he didn't hold back from her. He then blocked her and told me he's changing our phone numbers. He called his parents and the oldest I O sister, whom he is close with, and explained to them why she's never allowed to visit our home. He shared all of their text exchanges, and they were mortified. He asked them not to share our address, and when we changed to new numbers, they assured us that none of them shared this information with her, because she actually asked for his work schedule and mentioned driving up a day early to surprise him. My father-in-law had the most to say, and I get it. It's his baby girl, but he hadn't shared much info beforehand with anyone besides his wife. He said he always knew she had a little crush on him, but after her outburst at our housewarming years ago, they had a conversation about her behavior, and she told him that she had been keeping a diary about him since she was a teenager. She explained it was to process her emotions and to challenge negative thoughts. All I heard was that she wrote about him for years, so there's several journals in their home, probably enforcing her beliefs. Apparently, she only stayed away from my husband because my father-in-law kept her in check and was able to get her hospitalized several times for being a threat to herself. I don't know if all her issues stem from her unrequited love for him. Typing that just made me nauseous, but I hope she gets the help she desperately needs. He asked that they speak with her about his last text, but that we don't want to know the outcome. They told us they would deal with her and apologized for thinking she had resolved her issues. My in-laws are saints, and I thanked them for believing us and keeping her away for all these years. Luckily, she's currently living with them due to her issues, so they're going to speak to her tomorrow morning. The bio sister-in-law called me when we got off the phone with the in-laws. She told me that she was really sorry because she's the one who hooked the new BF and Tina up and suggested that she show him off at the baby shower, but admitted they had only been dating for like 2 weeks. She said she sent the text Tina sent to my husband to her, the BF, because that's one of her best guy friends and she wanted to protect him. So I'm pretty sure they're probably not a thing anymore. I'm kind of nervous how Tina will deal with two rejections so close together. The two sisters aren't that close. And she was audibly disgusted to find out that her sister has been pining for their brother all these years. She has a theory, though. She thinks it started with the older bio brother, Sean, because when Tina was little, she would follow Sean around all the time. He's older, so he went off to college abroad. Tina was about 10, and then he permanently moved to Europe. It seems like the crush transferred to my husband when Sean left. Sean hasn't been back to the States since he graduated high school, and no one really has contact with him. So she said she can't call and ask him about it. I have to admit, I'm kind of curious and would have been interested in hearing what Sean had to say, but I'll rest assured knowing our involvement in the whole thing is over. Someone pointed out that Tina is potentially dangerous and could hurt me or our children. And this really scared me. My husband is going to upgrade our alarm system and purchase more cameras. I don't work summers and will most likely be out on bed rest by the time I have to go back to work. So he wanted to ensure the kids and I were safe when he's away from the house. I forgot to mention we live about 5 hours away, so she would really have to go out of her way to show up here if she somehow found out where we live. So that's it, basically. This will most likely be my only update. I also want to point out for those that think my husband was intimate with her at some point to cause her erratic behavior. If that were the case, she would have loved to throw that in my face over and over. Plus, a guilty man would have tried to silence her a long time ago to keep me from finding out. You don't have to trust him, but I do. Thanks again for all the helpful input. I'm feeling a little more at ease and can't wait to see our closest friends and family at our shower.
So let me start this off by saying I apologize for how long this may be. My dad passed when I was 15. Him and my mom weren't all that close by that time. So while it hit me hard, she wasn't as phased as you'd expect. I joined the military when I was 17, and in my first year out of the house my mom remarried. I never really vibed with him, just had different personalities and such. He would often make snide remarks and tell me to man up about any inconvenience I'd be upset about. This led to spats between us, and I was often just as at fault as he was for these disagreements, though it never got too serious. I got medically discharged after a little under 5 years, and my mom and him said they'd be happy to have me back in the house. I told them it'd be brief, just until I got on my feet and got a job, and even offered to pay rent, to which they declined. About 3 days into being back home, my stepdad went alone with me, asked what he thought a fair rent would be. I was confused, but it was his house, so we came to an agreement, and I kept it from my mom, assuming he did not want her to know, as he never mentioned it around her. I never asked for anything from them, not out of spite. I just wanted to do things myself. He had a son from a previous marriage. Him and I didn't share many common interests or anything. But I never had any issues with him. I'd say we got along. The only thing is, he was given a lot from them. Paid for his schooling, paid for his car, paid for his living arrangements through college and even after. I was a little less than a year older than him, so he started college right after they married. Like I said, I didn't want or need the help, but it felt lame that he'd get all that assistance, and I was immediately asked for rent. But I digress. I moved out after 3 months, and not long after met a girl who I was crazy about, and we started dating. It was my first relationship, and I was over the moon the entire time. Like in that early relationship haze, but it was just constant. I was very nervous to bring her home. My mom and I were very close, and I always worried she'd be very judgmental of a girl I bring home. My worries ended up being unwarranted. They got along extremely well. My Gef does not have a family really, long story, so my mom and stepdad became like that for her. Her and my mom hit it off extremely well to the point they were hanging out just the two of them at times, and it made me extremely happy. My stepdad even really liked her, and I felt it brought us closer together, which isn't something I felt I wanted until we were. His dad abandoned his family growing up, and he put himself through school and got a nice high-paying job all by himself, which I had immense respect in him for. About a year, and I knew this was the girl I was going to marry. I told my mom and stepdad, and they both seemed extremely happy. She was practically part of the family already. My mom gave me her engagement ring my dad gave her, which she kept. The job I had didn't pay great, so I figured, even if it wasn't the ring she'd always have, it'd be a great placeholder. When I proposed, my gift told me it wasn't a placeholder, and she absolutely loved it. I was legitimately never happier in my life. We started wedding planning, and my mom and stepdad said they'd help take care of the finances. It was the first time they'd offered to help me financially, and it really meant a lot. Fast forward to about 3 months later, I had a call from my stepdad who said I needed to come over. Felt a bit ominous, but I went over there after work. When I got there, my mom, stepdad, stepbrother, and fiancé. I saw her on the couch and could tell she had been crying. I immediately thought someone had died and went to go sit next to her when my stepdad stopped me. He started hitting me with accusations of me cheating on her for our entire relationship. I was puzzled and told everyone there I don't even text any women I'm not related to besides her. Apparently, some girl had gotten my fiance's number and told her that we were sleeping together for over a year now. But she didn't know I was in a committed relationship. She sent her screenshots of alleged conversations and knew stuff about me that a random person wouldn't know. I, like a fool, couldn't see what was happening in front of me. I was stunned, saddened, and furious. I begged her from across the room to look at my phone and see I'd never done any of that. Her and my mother were both weeping, and I started to cry. My stepdad called me every word he could think of and escorted me out of the house, while telling me if he saw me on his property again, he'd call the police. I spent the next several weeks trying to contact them to no avail. Calls, texts, voicemails, every messaging app out there, nothing. After those weeks, I got a call from my stepdad who told me to stop trying to contact her, and that I was never welcome in his house or around his family again. I tried to call my mother over this time to no avail as well. After about a month, all I got from anyone was a text from my mother saying how sad and disappointed she was. My mom didn't really have much family, so they always spent holidays with my stepdad's side. They all shunned me as well. I saw their Christmas pictures on Facebook with my ex-fiancé present and seemingly in good spirits, which crushed me. The only family I had that would talk to me at all was my dad's brother and his family. Despite that even, they all seemed wary of me too. The only one that I think truly believed me was my uncle. I don't think I'd have made it without him, honestly. He showed me what I've been missing in fatherly love, and I've never been so grateful for anyone. About 6 months after it all, I moved away from the East Coast and settled out in California, needing to get away from it all. A little less than a year after I moved, I got a call from an area code from back home, which I rarely got anymore. I picked up, and it was my stepbrother, whom I promptly hung up on. He called me back, and I ignored it, but it stuck with me all day. I decided that if he called back again, I'd pick up, which he did later that night. It was awkward, at best. He told me my fiancé was really torn up for a long time. It took her nearly a year to even start looking again for a significant other. I hadn't at all since it ended. A few months into her doing so, my stepdad encouraged him to ask her on a date, which he did. Things went awk for the first couple outings, but never really clicked apparently. He told my stepdad about that, and the idiot told him, "I didn't get rid of OP for nothing. She's a great girl. You need to figure it out with her." I almost collapsed, and it was quickly replaced with anger. Apparently, he had gotten a girl, I still don't know who, to pose as someone I had an affair with and forged some message screenshots to have her send to my fiancé. He told me he'd said it to him about a month ago, and he didn't know what to do. Apparently, it bothered him enough that he couldn't just sit on the info anymore, so he told me and said he was going to tell my mom and fiancé the next day. He called me first as a courtesy, so he knew what to say to them regarding me. I told him where I was and that I'd appreciate it if they didn't immediately contact me, so I had some time to digest it all. That was last Tuesday. I just texted him and told him I was ready to talk to them if they wanted to, and that they could call me tomorrow. I really don't know what I'm going to say, or then for that matter. I expect some tears and a good number of apologies among other things. I don't really know if I'm ready to give forgiveness or anything like that. The only person I've told so far is my uncle, who I've asked to keep it to himself. Sorry again for how long this was. My therapist picked a shit week to go on vacation, and I needed to vent. Update 1. We'll post a longer update tonight, I think. No phone calls from anyone else yet, but a good call from my stepbrother that felt nice. I appreciate the support from everyone. I'll try to get to all the comments as well when I get a chance. Update 2. Alright, sorry for the delay. Busy day at work, and obviously a lot of other stuff on my mind. My stepbrother called me this morning and told me exactly what happened this past week. So apparently, what my stepfather said wasn't exactly what he told me. He elaborated more and said he was very careful with his words so as to not incriminate himself. Per him, heavily and very clearly implying what he did without directly saying what he did. Thing about my stepbrother is, he's much smarter than me. Instead of just walking to my mother and fiancé with that and getting into a shouting match with his dad, he took a different course that I wouldn't have thought of. He got a hold of my ex's phone and found the girl. Said it took him forever to backtrack it. He gave her a call and got her to meet him out in public. That's where it all came to head. She was a Tinder match with my stepfather, which I think pretty clearly indicates that he had been sleeping around on my mom. That irritated me even more, for obvious reasons. This girl alleges they did not sleep together. However, whether that is the truth did not matter to me. What does is my stepbrother talk to her and pulled on her heartstrings with the story and all that had happened. For the record, she clearly knew what she was doing. Maybe the time and hearing what had happened to me really shook her up, but again, it doesn't matter to me. She told him what happened. $1,000 for a phone call. That was the deal. He told her what to say and supplied the pictures of evidence. She made the call, and that was that. My stepbrother asked her if she could tell my mother and ex, and even offered to pay her again for the record. She agreed to for free, and that happened on yesterday. My stepfather is on a business trip until Wednesday, so it was the 4 of them there. She came in and spilled it all to my mom and ex. Stepbro said the tears started almost immediately from all 3 of them. After everything, he told them I was in California, and that he'd tell them when I wanted to be contacted. Was before I texted him. A little backstory for you guys to try to understand some stuff about my mother and ex-fiancé. And this is in no way defending their actions, just to help some folks understand. My mother and I were inseparable after my dad passed. We were each other's rock. When I turned 16, I began to drink to kinda dull it all a bit. I told my mom we'd spend New Year's together the year I was 16 and ended up out with my friends drunk as all hell. I got a text from my mom who spent the night alone at home, and that was where we were never quite the same. She sent me a text about how sad she was all alone, and I felt like complete shit over it. I stopped drinking that day until after everything went to hell. She is the type of person to always need someone. She can't handle being alone. I think when her and my dad's love began to fade, I filled that void, and when I was growing and ended up leaving home, my stepfather filled that void. Then my ex. As I said earlier, she doesn't have a family really. She had some real trust issues due to this along with some really nasty past relationships. Despite this, she never would talk badly about past boyfriends, which I really admired. One was physically abusive, and I consider that an obvious exception. I, despite being debilitatingly shy, have been often told that I'm cute, especially by younger girls, meaning younger than me, not children. I really never liked that title, as it's not very masculine, but got over it and learned to appreciate my boyish face and how often I would blush. My fiancé is just shy of 3 years older than me. I've always preferred older girls and never given much time or thought to the girls who seemingly liked me because they were 18 to 20. This didn't stop attention, which upset my fiancé. She'd often ask why I wasn't interested in these girls, why I didn't leave her for someone younger and prettier, etc. I always found her extremely attractive, significantly more attractive than me, honestly, and would always reiterate that to her, and that I never cared about any other girl. Sorry to get off track. That again, I hope, brings a little insight to why I think they did what they did and believed what they believed. Again, this is not an excuse for them, nor am I really all that understanding personally. At the end of the call with my brother, he said they both wanted to call today, and I told him that it'd be fine. So I sat and waited. By about 3 p.m., I was a little confused. I started to wonder if he'd made it all up to mess with me. It really worried me, honestly. I got a text from him asking if I was all good. I said yeah, and asked if they were actually planning on calling today. He said they'd been trying for the last few hours. I'd blocked them both when I moved out west and forgotten. Why I didn't block him, I don't know. I'm thankful I didn't, though. I unblocked them both and got a call from my mom about 10 minutes later. First thing she said was I sounded different. I almost hung up right then. Took all I had to just say, yeah. She broke down immediately after that. I really thought I'd feel more. I'd be lying if I said I felt nothing, but the pain of it all just took hold of me more than her words. She asked if I'd gotten her texts. I said no. I guess she'd been trying to text over the last year, but I had her number blocked. If she really wanted to reach me, she could have. Maybe that's a little shitty, but I know it's true. I pretty much told her that I'd be willing to build some semblance of a relationship back with time, and she was happy with that. She also told me she was getting all her necessities out of the house before my stepfather got home, and she'd be filing for divorce immediately. I believe her too. She may be a poor excuse for a mother in my eyes, but she's never been someone to take half measures. I really wish I could be there to see that prick's face when he comes back to an empty home. My ex got the phone next and did the same tearful apologies my mom did. I felt a little more with her. I actually tried to get her to think and remember how many times I told her I'd never do that to her and how much I loved her. She was beside herself, and to be honest, I'm glad. We talked for about half an hour, and I really thought it was pleasant. Even though I told myself for over a year now that it'd never happen again, thought there could still be something for us. She told me she still had the ring, and it made me upset. I told her to give it to my mom, 'cause it didn't belong to either of us anymore. I could tell that really crushed her, and selfishly, I wanted it too. She asked if she could call/text me. I told her it was fine, but to not expect a prompt response either way, which she understood. Pretty much gave her the same ultimatum as my mom. Though I said any chances of us having a future relationship were very slim, she said she understood that too. I talked to my brother last and thanked him for everything he'd done. He was helping my mom get her stuff out of his father's house. He apologized for all that had happened and told me he was going to go tell the rest of the family everything as well. Them, I have no connection to and won't say a word to, I don't imagine, except my stepdad's mother. Oldest person in any of the families, and she wished me a happy birthday and Merry Christmas over the last year. Maybe she was old enough that she doesn't care. Maybe she felt bad. But I'll talk to her, odd as it is. Sorry for all the rambling. I fly home for my uncle's 60th birthday the first week of March. It'll be my first time home since I moved out here. I'll definitely plan on seeing my brother as well. I'm not adverse to seeing my mom and ex, but I've made it clear to them that I've got a lot of healing to do, and so do they. If anything further happens, I'll update again, maybe after that trip home, but that looks like it for the time being. Also, this is kind of the last social media I have. I haven't been on here super often in the last year for the reasons I'm sure you could guess. I truly haven't seen any similar stories to mine that have been referenced in the comments, though I'd like to if you can find them. I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone would have regarding this whole thing to the best of my knowledge. Thank you, everyone. Brief update. Got a call from a number back home. I deleted most of my numbers a while ago from anyone I wasn't talking with. I picked up, and it was my stepfather. He said hello, and I hung up and blocked the number. I immediately called my mom, fiancé, and brother. They're all safe, not around him. Mom is in hotel that he doesn't know about. Fiancé and brother are at their residences, and both say they feel adequately protected. He is not by any indication a violent man, but better safe than sorry. My brother said he got a call from him this morning when he got home after my mom wasn't there and wouldn't answer. Brother told him what happened and not to contact any of them. Not sure how long he sat there, but he called me around 3 p.m. Pacific. About an hour ago, I got a message from a different number saying, "We need to talk." I assume that's him. I haven't responded. That's the latest. Stepdad's mother called me. Had her number saved because of what I previously stated. Was a bit worried it may have been him trying to gather some info or something. It wasn't. She's a very sweet lady who did not have to be nice to me in any way, but has shown me compassion. She was very nice and wished me well while also apologizing on behalf of the family. I thanked her and wished her the best too. Shocking he came from that woman. Final update. All right, sorry for the delay, everyone. Work has been busy, and I just got home this past weekend. I sat on that message from what it turns out was in fact my stepfather. My curiosity got the better of me and I called him. I did do what some had suggested and recorded the call using a different app. I wish I could say the call provided me something, but that would be disingenuous. Hearing his voice made my skin crawl. He asked how I was. I told him to cut the shit, and he laughed. Nothing incriminating on his end, of course. Talk was about 3 minutes long, about nothing. I didn't ask him why he wasn't content with me being with her. He said I wasn't man enough, and that a woman like her would have been wasted on me. He has a very traditional way of thinking relationship-wise, which is especially funny because it shows how much he never knew about our relationship or her in general. Without going off on a tangent, my ex is pretty notably against gender norms. She has a very well-paying job and told me she'd never be comfortable being a stay-at-home mom/wife. She often took the initiative for stuff in our relationship, etc. There wasn't really much to take away from the conversation other than that. I don't really know what he wanted, but I told him not to call me again and hung up. Not very eventful on that front. I flew back home prior to the weekend last week and went to my uncle's birthday party. Had a good time and the family was very welcoming and apologetic for not being more supportive after everything. None of them were ever rude or anything. I've got no negative feelings towards any of them. I talked with my brother and set up a meeting at his place with my ex and mother on Wednesday night. On Wednesday, I went over there and got what I expected. Lot of tears, lot of apologies. I admittedly had a tough time keeping it together. I talked with both of them and my brother all independently. Mom has already filed for divorce, which is good, and I appreciate her doing so. We had a decent conversation. You can tell it's strained, but I think we're making some progress towards healing. My brother and I had a good talk. Was nice to talk with him in person. He apologized for everything that had happened, and I accepted it. Can definitely tell he feels remorse for how it all shook out. And for the work he put in to make it right. I definitely don't hold a grudge. My ex and I had a very long discussion through most of the night. We've been talking over the phone for the last couple weeks already. A lot of it was just catching up. We're obviously two very different people now after nearly a year and a half away. We had some more serious discussions later on about everything. About how screwed up it all was and how broken I was by it all. She told me she'd already seen a therapist and asked if I would be willing to come with her to her appointment Thursday. She's gone above and beyond for everything I could have asked of her the last few weeks, and I am really truly appreciative of it. I went with her to her therapy appointment, which I feel was very productive for everyone. Her therapist seemed to be very appreciative of me being there as well. So we stayed talking for a while after, and I decided to ask if she wanted to go out Saturday night. So that's the plan right now. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. but I wanted to show her that I appreciate the effort she's putting in to try and mend what's been broken. And selfishly, I'd like to see her in a setting that isn't like the ones we've been in. So that's the update for now. Things are looking up. Haven't seen any of my stepdad or his family since getting home. Appreciate all the support from everyone. We'll update with anything new. Update 3/5. Date went very well. We had a nice night together. That dinner went to an arcade after, which we used to do somewhat frequently. It's the first date I've been on in nearly a year and a half, and I enjoyed myself a lot. We went back to her place after and talked. Going to discuss the next steps during this week before I head back to California. The distance part is going to be the hardest part, but I think it'll help keep the rose-colored glasses off if we aren't either each other constantly. Thank you again for the support from everyone. A lot of folks were asking for another update. Thanks, TikTok. I have remained in contact with my brother, mom, and ex-brother, and I still talk a reasonable amount. Mom and I have been building back. Definitely some improvements there. I'm truly glad she's back in my life, even if it's going to take some time for her to really be like a mother to me again. My ex and I spent a long time trying to see what was the best way to go about things. She flew out and spent time with me in California, which was very nice. At the moment, we're not together, and I think that's best for right now. As for my ex-stepfather, I really have no clue. He tried to contact my mother a few times following everything, but he never got a chance to talk. He hasn't been in contact with me at all, and for that I'm thankful. Hope I never run into him again. Life changes. I did end up moving back east for a new job. Few states away from my family still, which I think is healthy, and happy to answer any other questions you guys might have. Thank you for all the support in this madness.
Sunlight streams through the windows of our mansion in Chestnut Hill on this spring morning. As I prepare breakfast in the golden rays of dawn, the sweet aroma of pancakes wafts through the kitchen. Just imagining my 6-year-old son Noah's eyes lighting up fills me with joy. This 5-bedroom Georgian estate was a wedding gift from my husband's parents. The spacious kitchen is equipped with state-of-the-art appliances, and through the windows, I can see carefully tended tulips in the garden. "Mama, it smells wonderful." Noah's voice echoes as he bounds down the stairs. His blonde curls shimmer in the morning light, making him look like an angel. His big blue eyes are always full of curiosity, and his innocent smile gives me the strength to face another day. "Good morning, Noah. I put extra blueberries in today. Did you finish your homework from yesterday?" "Yes. I finished all my math and kanji. Do you think the teacher will praise me?" Gently stroking my son's head, I plate the fresh pancakes. The amber maple syrup creates tiny rainbows on the table as it catches the morning light. Noah happily picks up his favorite Spider-Man fork and begins to eat. My husband James had left early for work. As a manager at an investment bank, his schedule was always demanding. Though we'd been seeing less of each other lately, I believed it was just because of his busy work schedule. The sight of my tall husband in his gray suit was still my pride and joy. We've been married for 10 years. We met at Lucille, the upscale restaurant where I worked. At this premier French establishment on Newbury Street, James would come every Friday to eagerly ask me questions about wine when I was a novice sommelier. I gradually fell for his sophistication and gentlemanly demeanor. Our first date was at an art museum. After that, it was like something out of a movie: fine dining, weekend drives, and classical concerts. There was always an air of refinement around James. After 6 months of dating, when he proposed under the Eiffel Tower during our Paris trip, I felt an incomparable happiness. True, His mother Elizabeth initially disapproved of my profession as a sommelier, but after earnest persuasion from James, her only son, she appeared to accept it on the surface. "Mama, I'll do my best at school today. The piano recital is coming up, so I'll practice when I get home." As I nodded with a smile at Noah's words, I pushed my recent unease to the back of my mind. My husband had been coming home later and later, always glued to his phone. Large sums would occasionally disappear from our accounts, and our conversations had dwindled. Though I noticed the occasional flash of anxiety on his face, I couldn't bring myself to ask about it. Lately, my mother-in-law had been visiting more frequently, and her cold gaze toward me had intensified. Since being diagnosed with terminal cancer and given 6 months to live, she seemed to have become even more possessive of her son. Though she still maintained her dignity in luxury brands and perfect makeup, there was something obsessive in her eyes. "Caitlin, I'll help with the cleaning. You have work, don't you?" Her tone carried a hint of sarcasm as she invited herself in. To her, a prominent figure in Boston's high society with $300 million in assets, my job was still apparently distasteful. But right now, I want to focus on the happiness before me. I'm giving my all as a sommelier at Lucille, James at his investment bank, and Noah at the prestigious Beaver Country Day School. My best friend Mary supports me as the chef at the same restaurant. Our lunches together are precious moments of respite for me. "Hey, Kate. You haven't seemed yourself lately. Is something wrong?" Even yesterday during lunch when Mary asked me this, I deflected with a vague smile. I climb into the Lexus RX to take Noah to school. The spring streets of Boston, with tulips in full bloom, look like a postcard. The city is bustling with the Red Sox season opener, and Boston Marathon support banners flutter along the roadside. These morning drives are precious mother-son time. See you after school. Have fun in art class. As I kiss Noah goodbye at the school gates, a small worry crosses my mind. But I had no way of knowing it was a prelude to an irreversible tragedy. During the morning at the restaurant, there's a meeting about the new wine list. I change into my white sommelier suit and carefully pin up my curly hair. My reflection in the mirror looks the same as always. Yet my intuition tells me something is definitely changing. The morning work at Lucille progresses as usual. While I'm absorbed in selecting wines for the new list, my best friend Mary approaches me. "Kate, how about lunch? I made a new quiche." Mary is my only close friend and Lucille's talented chef. Lunch breaks with her have become my daily comfort. "Mary, I've actually been worried about something." Just as I was about to tell her about my husband's recent behavior, my phone rings. My mother-in-law's name appears on the screen. "Caitlin, I've prepared a special dinner tonight. Let's all eat together as a family. I've already contacted James." Her voice lacks its usual arrogance. There's something urgent about it. "Yes, of course. Is there some special occasion?" "Just a family gathering. Come at 7 o'clock. Bring Noah too." Even after hanging up, her tone bothers me. After finishing my afternoon work, I pick up Noah from school. He cheerfully tells me about his day as usual. But as we drive toward my mother-in-law's mansion, his energy seems to fade. "Noah, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick?" Yes, my head hurts a little. The mansion at twilight seems to carry a heavier atmosphere than usual. The crystal chandelier casts a cold light, and the room filled with expensive furnishings is eerily quiet. My mother-in-law is already seated in the dining room. She's wearing an expensive dress with perfect makeup. But there's an unfamiliar look in her eyes. Welcome, Caitlin, Noah. Please, sit down. The table is set with a full French course, hors d'oeuvres, soup, main dish, and dessert. Everything is plated with restaurant-quality perfection. Sorry, I'll be a bit late. A message arrives from my husband. My mother-in-law shows no particular concern and begins pouring wine. You know this wine, don't you? It's a 2015 Chateau Margaux. As a professional, I knew the wine's value. It easily exceeds $1,000 per bottle. Such an expensive wine isn't usually opened for a regular dinner. James arrived 30 minutes later. He seems somewhat unsettled as he takes his seat. His usually perfectly knotted tie is slightly askew. Mother, is there some special reason for today? Just a family dinner. The meal progresses in an unusual silence. The only sound is silver cutlery touching fine china. Noah unusually has no appetite and merely picks at his food. As the crème brûlée is being served for dessert, my vision begins to blur. Mama, I feel sick. Noah's voice seems distant. As I try to stand, my legs give way. We collapse onto the expensive carpet. Through my fading consciousness, I faintly hear a conversation. Everything will be resolved soon. Once they're gone, we'll be free. It was my husband's voice. Yes, Jamie. I'll set your life right with my remaining time. My mother-in-law's voice echoes. After that, my memories become fragmentary. An ambulance siren. Mary's desperate voice. Then, a white ceiling. The smell of disinfectant stings my nose. A steady rhythm marks the silence. My consciousness gradually emerges from a white fog. A private room in the hospital. Moonlight streams through the window. The wall clock second-hand heavily marks time, showing 2 a.m. Noah. I call my son's name in a hoarse voice. I feel a dull pain in my arm where the 4 is inserted. My body feels heavy as lead, and my thoughts are foggy. Mrs. Caitlin, how are you feeling? A doctor in a white coat quietly addresses me. She's a gentle-mannered woman in her 50s. Noah, my son. Don't worry. Your son is receiving treatment in another room. His condition is stable. How relieved I felt at those words. A deep sigh escapes naturally. What happened? Sleeping pill poisoning. Fortunately, it was discovered early, and appropriate treatment was administered. Thanks to your friend who called the ambulance. Mary. She saved us. When she couldn't reach me by phone, she became suspicious and came to check on us. Ma'am, are you able to talk? A middle-aged man in a suit stands in the corner of the room. He's the lawyer I consulted about divorce last week. Yes, I'm all right. There's important news. A serious situation has developed concerning you and Noah. The lawyer's voice carries a heavy weight. Actually, James and your mother-in-law have died in an accident. Those words freeze the air in the hospital room. What? Tonight, on the highway. They couldn't make a turn and broke through the guardrail. Fragmentary memories return to my mind. The dinner. The wine. The conversation I heard before losing consciousness. Initial police investigation has revealed something. They had tickets to the Caribbean at the time of the accident. And the lawyer pauses momentarily and takes out some documents. These are draft divorce papers that James secretly requested last week. They specify no child support or alimony payments whatsoever. My hands are shaking. Looking back, I had also consulted a different lawyer about divorce last week. My husband's changed behavior, the increasing secrets, the disappearing money. I knew we couldn't continue like this. Actually, the police contacted me. They found interesting evidence in James's car. Just then, the hospital room door opened. Let me explain. A detective with a commanding presence appeared. She stands straight, fixing me with a sharp gaze. I'm Detective Sarah Murphy from Major Cases. What I'm about to tell you concerns serious matters affecting you and your child. The detective sits down and opens her notebook. First, we found a large quantity of sleeping pills in James's car. They were obtained using your mother-in-law's prescription. And on the laptop in the car. She pauses briefly, sending me a glance as if checking my condition. Details of a murder plan were recorded. Those words send chills down my spine. According to the plan, after rendering you unconscious with sleeping pills, they intended to return at midnight and submerge the car in the ocean. I grab a glass of water with trembling hands. My throat is dry. My thoughts wander between reality and unreality. Why? While we're still investigating the full motive, several facts have come to light. James had substantial debts, and we've confirmed the existence of a 26-year-old mistress. The detective's words continue relentlessly. Your mother-in-law had terminal cancer with little time left. We believe she tried to resolve her son's financial collapse before dealing with the inheritance issues. Just then, a familiar voice comes from the hallway. Mama. Noah enters in a wheelchair, accompanied by a nurse. Noah. We embrace. Warm body temperature, steady heartbeat. We're alive. We can live. Ma'am, there's one more report. The lawyer speaks again. Your mother-in-law's will hasn't been found. This means the legal inheritance applies, and all assets will pass to Noah. I'll assist as guardian in managing the property. Moonlight streams through the window, gently illuminating mother and son. A nightmare-like event. But we're alive. We can greet another morning. Mama, I was scared. It's okay now, Noah. We have many more tomorrows waiting for us. As we embrace, dawn breaks around us. I was finally beginning to understand that this wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. A week after discharge, I learned the whole truth in an interview room at the police station. The mountain of documents Detective Murphy brought revealed my husband's life that I never knew. First, let me tell you about James's financial situation. The detective opened a blue file. It contained unbelievable numbers. He was a gambling addict. His casino debts amount to $50 million. Furthermore, embezzlement at his company has been discovered. The repayment deadline was the end of this month. Bank statement copies, stacks of IOUs spread across the desk. Desperate numbers written in my husband's handwriting. Luxury car loans, credit card bills, casino collection notices. The public face and the private face. The true identity of my husband, who led a perfect double life, was now being revealed. And this is the decisive evidence. The detective presented a luxury apartment contract. This is a lease agreement for a new home with his mistress, Jessica Morris. It seems they were planning a new life on St. Lucia in the Caribbean. My hands shake. 10 years of marriage. Memories of the family we built together. Was it all just perfect acting? Now, let me explain your mother-in-law's involvement. This time, a red file is opened. Elizabeth was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer 3 months ago. 6 months to live. Right after that, unusual movements began. Security camera footage plays one after another. Secret meetings at the hospital late at night. Private discussions in luxury hotel lobbies. The murder plan for mother and son had been developing since then. Large quantities of sleeping pills were prescribed to Elizabeth by her primary physician. Under the pretext of cancer pain. The detective spread out new materials. Furthermore, this is the notebook detailing the plan. The notebook contained meticulous entries. April 15th, location, home dining room, mix sleeping pills in wine, create alibi of business dinner, dispose of car in ocean at 2 a.m. Everything had been planned. Our lives were scheduled to be erased so simply. Why that particular night? To my question, the detective answered gravely. Elizabeth's condition suddenly worsened. She probably wanted to fix her son's life with her remaining time. Heavy silence falls in the interrogation room. However, an unexpected event disrupted the plan. The detective showed a new photo. Mary's image captured on security cameras. My best friend had become suspicious when she couldn't reach me by phone and came to check on us. When Mary called the ambulance, the perpetrators had finished their business dinner as planned and were preparing for the midnight crime. However, when they heard the ambulance sirens, security cameras caught the image of 2 people hurriedly getting into a car. The accident resulted from their hasty escape attempt. They couldn't make the turn and broke through the guardrail. As I listened to the story, I gazed out the window. Spring sunlight streams into the police station courtyard, where cherry blossoms sway in the wind. Mrs. Caitlin, there's one more important report. The detective takes out new documents. These are the results of investigating Elizabeth's estate. Total assets are $300 million. And no valid will has been found. That means, yes, by legal inheritance, all assets will pass to Noah. Of course, you'll be the property manager until he comes of age. Just then, my cell phone rings. It's the hospital. Mom. They say I can be discharged. Noah shouts happily on the other end. Really? That's wonderful, Noah. Yes. Mary's here too. We're going to look at the new house together, right? That's right. The new home Mary found for us. A house in a quiet residential area, a little way from Chestnut Hill. The place where our new life will begin. Mrs. Caitlin. The detective smiles gently. The remaining procedures can wait. Your precious son is waiting. I stand up and grab my bag. As I leave the police station, spring breeze caresses my cheeks. Flower petals fall as if blessing us. While driving, I thought about how this tragedy had brought us a new life. The wounds are deep, and healing will take time. But Noah and I have a future. And we have friends like Mary. When I arrive at the hospital, Noah is waiting in a wheelchair with Mary by his side. Mama. My son waves with a beaming smile. Mary too gives us a warm look. Let's go. To our new home. Noah nods firmly at my words. In the spring sunlight, our new story was about to begin. Jake, breakfast is ready. I called out my son's name while transferring pancakes from the skillet to a plate in the kitchen. Even in December, Phoenix mornings are crisp and refreshing. The morning sun streaming through the window cast an amber glow through the maple syrup bottle on the counter. Coming. I heard an energetic response from upstairs, followed by the sound of little feet scampering down the stairs. Then appeared my 6-year-old son Jake, wearing Spider-Man pajamas. His slightly disheveled brown hair and big blue eyes were identical to my ex-husband, whom I separated from 5 years ago. Oh my, still in your pajamas. You'll be late for school. The clock already showed 6:45. It takes 15 minutes by car to Desert Springs Elementary in the Paradise Valley Unified School District. We need to hurry to make it for the 7:30 start time. But Mom, I can't find my Spidey shoes. Jake said worriedly as he sat in his chair. His beloved Spider-Man shoes were a birthday present from his father last month. Since then, he won't go out without wearing them. Did you check the shoe rack by the door properly? Yes. Then I'll look for them. You eat your breakfast in the meantime. I gently patted Jake's head as he hesitated in front of the warm pancakes, then headed to the entryway. When I opened the shoe rack, sure enough, the red and blue Spider-Man shoes were neatly arranged on the bottom shelf. Found them. When I announced this, a relieved, "Yay," came back from the dining room. These ordinary exchanges are our daily routine. I'm Lisa Walker, a 33-year-old single mother working in accounting at Fry's Food Store, a local supermarket chain. I've always been good with numbers since high school, and after marriage and childbirth, I got my accounting certification. Now I work full-time while living with my only son and my father, who requires nursing care. Good morning, Grandpa. Jake, having finished his meal, went to peek into my father's room on the first floor. My father Thomas suffered a stroke 3 years ago, leaving his right side paralyzed and requiring nursing care. He used to be a high school teacher in the area and raised my sister Rachel and me with great dedication to education. Ah, Jake. You look energetic today. Father reached out his left hand from his seated position on the bed to pat Jake's head. The gesture was identical to how he used to pat us sisters. The home health aide, Martha, said she'll be here at 9 today. Father nodded slightly when I reported this. We use home care services on weekdays. Since my mother passed away 5 years ago, this service has been supporting our life with Father. All right, Jake, time to get dressed. At my hurrying voice, my son waved to his grandfather and bounded up to the second floor. Our morning routine is always precisely timed. Wake up at 6, finish breakfast, get ready, leave home at 7. After dropping my son off at school, my work starts from 8 until 5. My job in the supermarket's accounting department is more fulfilling than I expected. Working with numbers, which I've been good at since high school, might be my true calling. My colleagues are understanding and even allow me to check on my father during lunch breaks. After school, Jake spends time in the after-school program. Though he's not enrolled in any specific activities, I want him to value time spent playing with children his age. He has a bright and sociable personality, and the program staff evaluate him as a child with many friends. When I pick him up after finishing work at 6, he always runs up to me with a beaming smile, calling Mom. Then we head home for dinner preparation, helping father, and checking Jake's homework. Time flows busily but warmly. Weekends revolve around taking father to his medical appointments. Though the drive to Honor Health Scottsdale Thompson Peak is a bit far, father is satisfied with the treatment there. He seems to be starting to think about inheritance matters lately, but for me, his health is the primary concern. I meet with my ex-husband once a month for Jake's visitation. Our divorce 5 years ago was amicable, without any settlement payments. We maintain a good relationship, partly for Jake's sake. On the other hand, I've been out of touch with my sister Rachel for 3 years. We became estranged over disagreements about father's care. The residential area of Paradise Valley is already starting its Christmas decorations this year. Though neighborhood relationships are modest, they're warm, and I'm proud to live in this area. While we're not wealthy, we manage to get by with father's pension and my salary. Hey Mom, what's for dinner tonight? Jake tugged at my arm while I was lost in thought. Well, how about a rotisserie chicken from Safeway? Yay! I love that. My son's smile blows away my fatigue. I believed such simple happiness would surely continue forever. December in Phoenix sees early sunsets. After 4:30 p.m., dusk begins to settle in. In the car heading to the after-school program after work, I was thinking about tomorrow's menu. During this season, the warm light from Desert Springs Elementary School's after-school program building melts into the winter twilight. Mom! When Jake spotted me, he ran up with his usual beaming smile. The sound of his Spider-Man shoes tapping lightly on the floor echoed in the quiet hallway. Today in art class, I made a dinosaur with clay. The teacher said it was really good. Holding hands, my son happily continued talking about his school day. Even after getting in the car, his stories continued with, and then. We turned from Cave Creek Road onto Tatum Boulevard, following our usual route home. However, when our house came into view, I felt my spine freeze. 2 police cars were parked in front of the house. The words, Phoenix Police Department, glowed blue in the twilight. 2 uniformed officers and a man and woman in plain clothes appeared to be waiting by the front door. Look, police officers. Jake pointed curiously. I pulled the car over to the curb with stiff hands and turned off the engine. My heart was pounding violently. I had a feeling that something terribly wrong was happening. When I got out of the car, the woman in plain clothes stepped forward. Showing her badge, she announced in a cold voice. "Mrs. Lisa Walker. We're here to arrest your son Jake on suspicion of theft." My mind went blank. There must be some mistake. My voice was trembling. I unconsciously tightened my grip on Jake's hand. "Mom, that's not true." My son cried out tearfully. His voice made my heart feel like it was shattering into 1,000 pieces. The other plainclothes detective held out a smartphone. It showed security camera footage from the Target superstore in Paradise Valley Mall. On the screen was indeed a boy who looked exactly like Jake. The same Spider-Man shoes. The same height. The same hairstyle. I couldn't find words. "We've confirmed 3 incidents between December 1st and 15th. The female detective continued matter-of-factly. "The total value of stolen goods exceeds $5,000. The main items are a limited edition Dragon Quest Masters gaming console worth $500, a complete set of rare figures worth $2,000, and various games and toys totaling $2,500. But that's..." Beside me, Jake was trembling slightly. "Multiple classmates have testified to receiving the stolen items. Additionally, all crimes occurred between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m., coinciding with the after-school program's free time." "No. I didn't." The male detective cut off Jake's desperate voice. "The shoe prints also match. We'd like to discuss this matter in detail at the station." During the drive to North Mountain Precinct following the police car, my mind was in chaos. I need to contact Father. I need to tell Martha, the home health aide, I'll be late. A lawyer. Various tasks kept surfacing and disappearing in my mind. The police station was wrapped in an unusual tension. When we were shown to the interrogation room, the female detective's attitude suddenly softened. Probably considering Jake's age. However, the male detective maintained his stern expression. "Jake, would you like to talk to us?" The female detective spoke gently. But my son, clinging to me, just shook his head vigorously. His tear-stained cheek touched my arm. "If you tell us the truth, we'll be as accommodating as possible." The male detective pointed to the security camera photos spread on the desk. 3 photos. Indeed, they all looked exactly like Jake. But... no. I didn't do it. Jake's cry echoed through the stark interrogation room. While holding my son's shoulders, I was thinking desperately. Searching through memories. True, Jake had recently become interested in games. But I don't remember him begging for a new game console. And the figures. May I call a lawyer? Finally regaining my composure, I made this request. The female detective nodded slightly. "Of course. In the meantime, we'll check your child's belongings." The contents of his backpack were carefully examined one by one. Textbooks. Notebooks. Lunch bag. All just normal elementary school items. Outside had completely darkened. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the police station, I held my son tightly. Was this a nightmare? If I woke up, would our normal daily life, wrapped in the scent of morning pancakes, return? But reality was mercilessly bearing down on us. The interrogation room door opened, and our waiting lawyer, Joseph Martin, entered. He was a veteran lawyer introduced through father's acquaintance. He approached us with a calm expression and first gently patted Jake's head. "It's okay, Jake. I'll definitely help you." At those words, Jake's trembling seemed to ease slightly. Attorney Martin turned to face the police and first requested that no further questioning be conducted today, arguing that late-night interrogation was inappropriate for a first-grade elementary student. "Let's set up a discussion tomorrow. Tonight, please let this child go home." After some deliberation, the detectives permitted us to go home. However, with the condition that we return to the police station at 10 a.m. tomorrow. When we left the station, the cold night air touched our cheeks. Jake, who got into the car, was still trembling slightly. His reflection in the rearview mirror had completely lost his usual bright expression. "Hey, Mom." "Yes. Do we have to go back to that place tomorrow?" I couldn't answer my son's trembling question. I could only squeeze his hand tightly. While driving through the quiet residential streets of Paradise Valley, my head was filled with questions that kept surfacing. Why did this happen? Why did my son have to face such suspicion? And above all, how could we overcome this situation? The next morning, when I called Desert Springs Elementary School, Principal Anderson's voice was cold. "Mrs. Walker, I'm very sorry, but we'd like Jake to stay home until this situation is resolved." The businesslike tone made my heart constrict. But nothing has been proven yet. Multiple students have testified to receiving expensive games and figures from Jake. We're receiving many complaints from parents. Receiving students. I desperately searched my memory, going through Jake's close friends one by one. Who, under what circumstances, would have given such testimony? Could you tell me the names of the children? I'm sorry, but since this is an ongoing investigation. After hanging up the phone, I collapsed onto the living room sofa. Outside the window, the morning sun was shining as usual. But I had a sensation of the world's colors gradually fading away. "Mom." A small voice came from the top of the stairs. It was Jake. Last night he had woken up from nightmares multiple times, finally falling asleep only towards morning. In his pale blue pajamas, he looked at me anxiously. "Don't I have to go to school?" I couldn't answer that question. Instead, I went up the stairs and held him tightly. His small body was trembling slightly. I explained the situation to my supervisor Margaret and took some time off. "Lisa, I know your son. I can't believe he would shoplift. Take as many days as you need to get to the bottom of this." Her voice over the phone carried warm consideration. Encouraging messages kept arriving from colleagues too. "Let me know if there's anything I can help with. We believe in Jake." However, the reaction from the neighborhood was the opposite. Mrs. Brown from next door, whom I met while taking out the morning garbage, clearly avoided eye contact with me. The greeting we used to always exchange was now just a small murmur into empty space. Martha, who comes to care for father, seemed to have heard the neighborhood rumors too. Everyone seemed surprised that this happened in such a quiet residential area. Her expression as she conveyed this indirectly made me feel unable to stay there. 5 years since starting our life in Paradise Valley. Now, my son and I were gradually becoming isolated from the community we had finally gotten used to. The second police interview. This time we were allowed to examine the security camera footage in detail. Indeed, a boy who looked exactly like Jake. But something felt off. The way he walked. His expression. At this time, my son should have definitely been in after-school care. There should be records, right? However, the detective coldly stated that the video timestamp completely matches the after-school program's free time. 3 incidents. Thursday, December 1st, Thursday the 8th, and Thursday the 15th. All between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. After returning home, I wrote out a timeline in my notebook. Evidence of alibis. Unnatural points. Noting down concerning aspects one after another. I also requested verification of the security camera footage. But they said results wouldn't come immediately. The hardest part was seeing Jake's condition. "Hey Mom, will Santa still come this year?" With just a week until Christmas, there was no hope in my son's voice. During what should be an exciting season, Jake became increasingly withdrawn to his room. He stopped wearing his Spider-Man shoes. Calls from friends gradually decreased. Even weekend visits with his father, which were previously arranged, now seemed to weigh heavily on him. I didn't do anything wrong. At night, while sleeping next to him, Jake muttered softly, "I believe you." While holding him tightly, I declared, continuing to believe in this child. That was the only certain thing I could do right now. I visited the Target superstore several times. The location of security cameras. The product display areas. And information about the students who supposedly received the stolen goods. Little by little, but surely, we had to get closer to the truth. I also consulted with the Paradise Valley Unified School District office. Mr. Blake, Jake's teacher, testified about his usual behavior. He's a bright and honest student. I've never seen him bully others or tell lies. But now, even those words couldn't change the situation. Cars passing in front of our house clearly slowed down to observe us. Anonymous letters of criticism began to appear in our mail. Should we move away? We also needed to consider placing father in a care facility. However, there were things to do before that. The footage of the incidents. The students who received the goods. And the existence of a boy who looked exactly like Jake. I will definitely unravel these mysteries. The situation changed when that phone call came. "Mrs. Walker, this is Phoenix PD North Mountain Precinct. We've found new footage. Could you come immediately?" When I arrived at the police station, that female detective was waiting. The monitor showed footage from a different angle at the Target superstore. This is from a security camera near the emergency exit at the back of the store. It's filmed from a different location than the previous footage, but the footage clearly showed a boy who looked just like Jake. But this time, he wasn't alone. A woman in a suit was holding the boy's hand. And more than anything, this child's walk is different from Jake's. I couldn't help but exclaim. The boy in the footage had a slight limp in his right foot. Though he wore the same Spider-Man shoes, his movement was clearly different from Jake's. Actually, we also received photos from a shopper. The photo the detective presented showed a clear profile of the woman. A familiar profile. But it was my sister, who had been out of contact for 3 years. Rachel. The moment I spoke that name, all the pieces started falling into place. The police quickly changed the direction of their investigation. Rachel Walker. My sister, who had cut off contact 3 years ago over disagreements about father's care. And she had a son, Daniel, the same age as Jake. When school photos were obtained, the striking similarity between Daniel and Jake became apparent. Eyes shaped like father's. Nose bridged like mother's. They looked so identical, it was hard to believe they were just cousins. What proved decisive was the re-questioning of witnesses. Actually, the toys were given to me by a lady I didn't know. One student nervously began to speak. He said she approached him in the parking lot, saying, "I have something nice for you." But she told me to keep quiet. I was scared. Similar testimonies began to gather. Rachel had been systematically distributing stolen goods to Jake's classmates. Moreover, she had carefully chosen when to do it. On Thursdays, there's free time in after-school care, so Jake could slip out. Meticulous preparation to make it seem that way. Making her son wear the same Spider-Man shoes, committing crimes at the same time. Silencing the children who received the goods, to use as evidence later. Everything was planned to frame my son. And Jake's alibis were verified one after another. During Thursday free time, Jake was always in the art room playing with clay. The after-school care instructor testified. At the time shown on the security cameras, my son was definitely inside the school. Rachel had been living about 30 minutes by car from father's house. After her divorce, she had been moving between part-time jobs due to financial difficulties. And she had been harboring resentment towards me for taking sole responsibility for father's care. Let me help with dad's care too. I should have rights to the house too, shouldn't I? That's what my sister had demanded 3 years ago. But by then, father was already accustomed to living with me and strongly refused to change his environment. After that, Rachel suddenly cut off contact and moved away. Mounting financial struggles. Late child support payments. And anxiety over inheritance rights to father's house. All of these had cast shadows on my sister's heart. The arrest was carried out quietly. Rachel offered no resistance and admitted to all charges. Her son Daniel had just followed along, told he would get games, without knowing his mother's plan. My sister takes everything. Her words in the interrogation room left me speechless. I never knew my own sister's hatred ran so deep. When the truth of the incident came to light, circumstances changed rapidly. Desert Springs Elementary School officially approved Jake's return. Principal Anderson personally offered words of apology at a school assembly. We now know that Jake did nothing wrong. Let's all get along well again. Classmates gradually began to speak to Jake again. Tentatively, but with genuine kindness. Even the children who had received the goods came to apologize with their parents. The neighborhood's attitude changed too. You've been through so much. I'm truly sorry. Mrs. Brown came to visit with a homemade chocolate cake. Our warm relationships began returning one by one. When we got home, Jake was wearing his Spider-Man shoes for the first time in a while. Mom, can I go to the park?" His voice had regained its lost vitality. On Christmas Eve night, we were quietly embracing in front of the living room tree. Father joined us in his wheelchair, sharing this small family moment. Outside, stars twinkled in the Paradise Valley night sky. The painful days we'd been through seemed to fade away like a bad dream. Rachel's arrest was carried out that evening. When Phoenix PD investigators surrounded her apartment, she seemed to have already realized everything. "I'm sorry." Just before being handcuffed, she whispered softly to me. Her eyes mixed hatred, regret, and deep exhaustion. Daniel, standing beside her, stood dazed, unable to comprehend what was happening. "I'll take care of Daniel." How painful it was to say those words. But I felt it was my responsibility as a sister and an aunt. During the trial after indictment, all the truth came to light. After her divorce, Rachel had accumulated debt from financial hardship and pinned her hopes on inheritance rights to Father's house. However, she felt those hopes were dashed when Father chose to live with me. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 2 years imprisonment, suspended for 4 years, for charges of theft and exploitation of a minor. Rachel kept her head deeply bowed as the verdict was delivered in court. Afterward, she entered a rehabilitation program and began receiving counseling. Daniel temporarily stayed at a children's home but was arranged to spend weekends at our house. Christmas morning, 2 red boots were placed in the living room. One for Jake and one for Daniel. The 2 children were initially shy and kept their distance, but gradually warmed up to each other while opening presents. "Hey, Mom." Jake looked up at me while spreading out his presents. "Will Aunt Rachel be able to spend Christmas with us again someday?" That innocent question made my eyes well up. Indeed, the wounds were deep and would take time to heal. But I too secretly hoped for the day when we could gather again as a family. Father watched silently from his wheelchair. Quiet tears glistened in his eyes. As the new year arrived, tranquility returned to Paradise Valley. But it was different from before, carrying a gentler air. Though wounded, we had found stronger, deeper connections. While slipping Santa's letter into the red boots by the entrance, I found myself praying. May we spend next Christmas with Rachel too. And may this family's wounds heal, little by little.